Get back on that train. Sheriff James Cutter's voice cut through the steam like a blade, his hand hovering near his revolver. But Clara Whitmore didn't flinch. She stood on that dusty platform, suitcase trembling in her grip, and met his eyes with something he never expected to see again. Hope. 5 years of running, 5 years of lies, and now she was back. Back to the town that wanted her gone. Back to the man who'd sworn to forget her. But this time she carried a truth that would shatter everything he thought he knew. Stay with me until the end of this story, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The evening sun bled copper across the Montana sky, painting the depot in shades of rust and regret. Dust motes danced in the slanting light that cut through the station's warped wooden slats, each particle suspended like a frozen moment in time. The 547 to Billings sat wheezing on the tracks, its engine huffing great clouds of steam that rolled across the platform like the ghosts of conversations never finished. Everything in Redemption Bend seemed to exist in that golden hour between day and night, between truth and lies, between what was and what might have been. Clara Whitmore's boots touched the platform, and the world shifted. She'd forgotten how small the depot was, how the ceiling beams sagged with the weight of 1,000 departures, how the ticket window still bore the crack from the storm of '68. 5 years had passed since she'd last stood here, and yet nothing had changed. The same faded advertisements for railway passage plastered the walls. The same three-legged bench sat in the corner where old Timothy Marsh used to whittle. The same smell of coal smoke and creosote hung in the air like a permanent resident. But everything had changed. Everything. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her carpet bag, a small, weathered thing that held the sum total of her new life. Or her old life. She wasn't sure anymore which was which. The dress she wore was simple, dove gray with black buttons, the kind of thing a widow might wear. The kind of thing a woman trying to disappear might choose. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, a few rebellious strands escaping to frame a face that had seen too much sun and not enough sleep. The platform was nearly empty. A merchant with a barrel of goods, a mother clutching 2 small children, an old cowhand who looked like he'd been riding since before the territory had a name. Their eyes all turned toward her as she stepped down, and she felt the weight of their recognition like a physical thing. Clara Whitmore, back from the dead, back from wherever women like her went when they ran. She took a breath, tasting alkali and sagebrush on the wind that swept down from the mountains. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere a door slammed. The ordinary sounds of a town going about its business, unaware that its careful peace was about to shatter. Then she saw him. Sheriff James Cutter stood at the far end of the platform, a silhouette cut from shadow and failing light. Even at this distance, she knew the set of his shoulders, the tilt of his head, the way he held himself like a man braced for impact. 6 feet of lean muscle and hard decisions, wrapped in a duster that had seen better days, and a hat that cast his face in darkness. He wasn't supposed to be here. The train was early. She was supposed to have time. Time to find a room. Time to gather her courage. Time to figure out what she'd say when they finally faced each other. But time, it seemed, had run out. James took a step forward, then another, his boots striking the wooden planks with a deliberate rhythm. The station master, a nervous man named Fletcher, scurried out of his way like a mouse before a hawk. The other passengers suddenly found pressing reasons to examine their tickets or adjust their luggage. Even the train seemed to hold its breath, its constant hissing quieting to a whisper. Clara. Her name left his mouth like an accusation, like a prayer, like something that hurt to say. She forced herself to meet his gaze. 5 years had carved lines into his face that hadn't been there before. His jaw was harder, his eyes colder, the set of his mouth more grim. But underneath it all, she could still see the man she'd known, the deputy with the easy smile, the one who'd kissed her under the cottonwoods while the creek sang its endless song. James. Her voice came out steady. Small miracle, that. He stopped 10 feet away, the distance between them measured in more than planks and air. His hand rested near his gun belt, not threatening, just there, the way a man's hand rests when he's forgotten what it means to be at ease. His eyes traveled over her face, searching for something. What? She couldn't say. Evidence? Proof? Some sign of the girl she'd been before everything went wrong? You shouldn't have come back. His voice was gravel and whiskey, rough from years of hard words and harder truths. I had to. Had to. He repeated the words like they were foreign, incomprehensible. 5 years, Clara. 5 years of silence, and now you had to? The merchant had disappeared into the station. The mother had herded her children to the far end of the platform. The old cowhand had suddenly remembered he needed to check on his horse. In Redemption Bend, everyone knew when to make themselves scarce. Get back on that train. James took another step forward, and now she could see his face clearly in the dying light, see the muscle jumping in his jaw, see the shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy burdens, see the carefully maintained wall he'd built between himself and everything that could hurt him. I can't do that. You can. His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. And you will. This town's got enough trouble without you stirring up what ought to stay buried. Behind her, the conductor appeared in the train car doorway. 5 minutes to departure, he called. All aboard for Billings, Helena, and points north. Clara didn't move. Her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape her chest. This wasn't how she'd imagined it. In her mind, she'd had time to explain, time to make him understand. But standing here, facing the full force of his anger, his hurt, his carefully controlled rage, she realized how foolish those imaginings had been. You think you can just walk back into this town? James continued, his voice rising just enough that the words carried an edge. After what happened? After what he did? He's dead, James. I know he's dead. Something flickered in his eyes, memory, maybe, or regret. I'm the one who brought his body back, remember? I'm the one who had to tell this town that the man who robbed the bank, who shot Deputy Harris, who burned down the Hendersons' barn, was finally stopped. You think I don't know he's dead? The train whistled, a long, mournful sound that echoed off the mountains and rolled across the prairie like a warning. Then you know I'm free, Clara said softly. Free. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You were never his prisoner, Clara. You chose him. You married him. You ran with him when the law came calling. That's not... She started, but he cut her off with a sharp gesture. I don't want to hear it. Whatever excuse you've rehearsed, whatever story you've convinced yourself is true, I don't want to hear it. He took another step, close enough now that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow from a fight when he was 17. Get back on that train. The conductor leaned out again. 3 minutes, folks. Clara's hand went to her pocket, feeling the small weight there. The secret she'd carried across 5 states and 1,000 miles. The truth that had driven her back to this God-forsaken town where everyone knew her name and no one wanted to see her face. I came back for you, she whispered. James went absolutely still. For a moment she thought he hadn't heard her, that her words had been swallowed by the hiss of the train and the whistle of the wind. But then she saw the color drain from his face, saw his hand clench into a fist at his side. Don't. The single word carried the weight of a command and a plea. Don't you dare. It's the truth. The truth. He shook his head slowly. You wouldn't know the truth if it bit you. The truth is you chose him over me. The truth is you left me standing at the church while you ran off with a man who destroyed half this county. The truth is you're a liar, Clara, and whatever game you're playing now, I'm not interested. Each word landed like a blow. She'd known it would be hard. She'd known he'd be angry. But knowing and experiencing were two different things, and the raw pain in his voice, the bitter fury that laced every syllable, cut deeper than she'd imagined possible. Final call for Billings! The conductor's voice was impatient now. All aboard! The platform was completely empty now, except for the two of them. Even Fletcher had retreated inside the station, peering through the grimy window like a spectator at a hanging. The sun had dropped below the horizon, and the sky was turning that deep purple that came before true dark. The first stars were beginning to appear, faint and far away. I never married him, Clara said. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and absurd. James stared at her like she'd started speaking in tongues, like she'd sprouted wings, like the ground had opened up and revealed itself to be sky. What? I never married him, James. I never chose him over you. I never. Her voice broke, and she had to force the words out. I never stopped loving you. His face went through a series of transformations: disbelief, anger, confusion, something that might have been hope before it was ruthlessly crushed. You're lying. I'm not. You stood me up at the church. Reverend Patterson waited for 3 hours. The whole damn town was there, Clara. They saw the empty space where you should have been standing. I know. You disappeared that same night, you and Cole Davidson. The bank was robbed. Deputy Harris was shot. And you were gone. I know. The words came out sharper than she intended, cracking with emotion. I know what it looked like. I know what everyone thought, but it wasn't like that. The train's whistle screamed one last time, a sound of finality and departure. The wheels began to turn, metal shrieking against metal, steam hissing like a chorus of angry ghosts. The cars started to move, slowly at first, then gathering speed. James grabbed her arm, his fingers tight enough to bruise. Get on that train, Clara, right now. This is your last chance. She looked up at him, at the face she'd seen in her dreams every night for 5 years, at the man she'd crossed half the country to find. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back. She'd promised herself she wouldn't cry. Not yet. Not until he knew everything. I can't. Her free hand went to her pocket, closed around the small velvet pouch she'd guarded with her life. Not until you see this. Not until you understand. Understand what? That you're a liar? That you destroyed everything we had for nothing? I understand plenty. The train was picking up speed now, the last car starting to pull away from the platform. In another moment, it would be gone, disappearing into the gathering darkness, and her only escape would vanish with it. Look at me, she said, and there was something in her voice, a note of desperation, of absolute conviction, that made him pause. Really look at me, James. Do I look like a woman who chose wrong? Do I look like someone who's been living the life she wanted? He did look then, really look, and she saw the moment his anger faltered. She knew what he was seeing, the hollows under her eyes, the gauntness in her cheeks, the way her dress hung loose on a frame that had lost too much weight, the calluses on her hands from work she'd never had to do before, the weariness that went bone deep and showed in every line of her body. Clara. Her name came out differently this time, softer, uncertain. She pulled her arm free and reached into her pocket. Her fingers closed around the velvet pouch, and she drew it out, holding it between them like an offering, or an explanation, or maybe both. He was dying when you found him, she said quietly. The bullet had torn through his lung. He had hours at best, and he knew it. Before he went, before the end, he asked me to bring something back. He asked me to give it to you. James's eyes dropped to the pouch, and she saw his throat work as he swallowed. What is it? Instead of answering, she loosened the drawstring and tipped the contents into her palm. A silver ring tumbled out, tarnished with age and travel, but still recognizable, still unmistakable. The ring he'd given her the night before their wedding. The ring she'd worn for exactly 6 hours before everything fell apart. James's face went white. He reached out, his hand shaking, and touched the ring with one finger like he was afraid it might burn him. Where did you get this? From Cole. He'd kept it all these years, he said. Her voice caught, and she had to pause, had to breathe. He said he'd taken it from me that night to keep me safe. To keep you safe. He said if I was wearing it when they found me, they'd know. They'd know I'd been working with you all along. Working with me? James's voice was barely a whisper. What are you talking about? The train was gone now, swallowed by distance and darkness. The platform stretched empty around them, a stage set for a scene 5 years in the making. Clara closed her fingers around the ring, feeling the cool metal warm against her skin. The bank robbery, she said. Cole didn't plan it. You did. The words fell like stones into still water, rippling out into silence. James took a step back, shaking his head. That's insane. I was the deputy. I was the one who tried to stop it. You were the deputy who needed to stop a gang that was terrorizing the county, a gang that was too smart, too well connected to catch any other way. Clara held his gaze, willing him to remember, to acknowledge the truth they'd both buried. You needed someone on the inside, someone the gang trusted, someone who could gather evidence and help you bring them down from within. Cole Davidson was that person. James's voice was hollow. He was my informant. Yes. And you knew? Yes. The night was fully dark now, the stars brilliant overhead in the vast Montana sky. Somewhere in town, a piano started playing, the melody drifting on the wind. Somewhere a woman laughed. Somewhere life went on, ordinary and unaware. That night at the church, James said slowly, each word carefully measured, when you didn't show up, when everyone waited and you never came. Cole sent word. The gang was moving up their timeline. They were going to hit the bank that night instead of waiting for the weekend like they'd planned. He needed to be there, needed to be part of it so his cover wouldn't be blown, and She swallowed hard. I needed to disappear too. If I'd married you that day, if I'd become the sheriff's wife, the gang would have suspected Cole. They would have known he was the leak. They would have killed him. So you ran. James's voice was empty of emotion, drained of everything but a terrible understanding. You let everyone think you'd chosen him over me. You let them think you were his lover, his accomplice, his wife. It was supposed to be temporary. A few weeks, maybe a month, just long enough for you to round up the gang, to get the evidence you needed. Then Cole and I would come back and we'd explain everything. But it didn't work out that way. No. Clara's hand tightened around the ring until the edges bit into her palm. The robbery went wrong. Deputy Harris wasn't supposed to be there that night. When he showed up, when he drew his gun, one of the gang members panicked. The shot that killed Harris, it wasn't meant for him. It was meant for Cole. James closed his eyes. In the darkness, he looked like a statue carved from grief, every line of his body rigid with the effort of holding himself together. Go on. Cole was hit. Not fatally, not then, but bad enough. The gang scattered, and you came after them. You tracked them for weeks, picked them off one by one, and the whole time I was running with Cole, trying to keep him alive, trying to keep us both alive until we could figure out a way to contact you safely. Why didn't you? Why didn't you send word, leave a sign, something? We tried. The words came out bitter. 3 times we tried. Each time, someone found us before we could make contact. Someone from the gang who'd survived your hunt. Someone who wanted revenge. We realized there must have been a leak in your department, someone feeding information to whoever was left. So we kept running. We changed names, changed towns. We went from Montana to Wyoming to Colorado to New Mexico and back again. Always one step ahead, always looking over our shoulders. A door opened somewhere, spilling light and noise into the street, then closed again, leaving them in shadow. James opened his eyes and looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. For 5 years? You ran for 5 years? For 5 years, Cole got sicker. The bullet wound never healed properly. Infection set in, then lung fever. By the end, he was coughing up blood, could barely walk. We made it to a town in New Mexico, Santa Rosa they called it, and I knew he was dying. I got him to a doctor, but it was too late. The bullet had done its damage, and time had done the rest. Claire's voice wavered, and she paused, breathing through the memory. The small room that smelled of carbolic and death. The rattle in Cole's chest as he struggled for each breath. The doctor's sympathetic eyes as he delivered the news she already knew. Before he died, he told me everything about how he'd kept the ring all those years, hidden in a false bottom in his boot. About how he'd always meant to give it back but never found the right time, the safe time. About how he was sorry for what it had cost me, my reputation, my home, my life. About how I needed to go back, needed to find you, needed to make you understand. Understand what? James's voice was rough. That everything I believed for 5 years was a lie? That I buried my partner, hunted down a gang, and spent every day since then thinking the woman I loved had betrayed me, when really... He stopped, the words choking off. When really, I was trying to protect you. Clara finished softly. Both of us were. Cole and I, both. The silence stretched between them, heavy with revelation and regret. James turned away, his shoulders bowed like a man carrying a weight too heavy to bear. He walked to the edge of the platform, staring out at the darkness where the train had disappeared. Why now? He asked finally. Why come back now after all this time? Because Cole's dead, because the gang is scattered or hanged, because the man in your department who was feeding them information, Deputy Marshal, was caught last year running a smuggling operation in Oregon. I read about it in a newspaper. The article said he'd confessed to everything, including his connection to the bank robbery gang. She took a breath. The danger is over, James. Finally, after all these years, it's safe to tell the truth. James turned back to her, and in the starlight, she could see the tracks of tears on his face. Safe, he repeated. You think this is safe? You think telling me this now, after everything, makes things safe? I think it makes things true. She held out her hand, the ring gleaming in her palm. This is yours. It was always yours. I never stopped wearing it, not in my heart, not for a single day. And I came back because I couldn't spend one more day living a lie. Even if you hate me, even if you tell me to leave and never come back, you deserve to know the truth. He stared at the ring, at her outstretched hand, at her face. The war playing out in his expression was painful to watch. Anger and grief and longing and love all tangled together in a knot that might never come undone. You destroyed me, he said quietly. That day when you didn't show up at the church, when I realized you were gone, it destroyed me, Clara. I became someone else, someone harder, someone who didn't believe in happy endings anymore. And now you're telling me it was all for nothing? All that pain, all that anger, all those years of hating you and hating myself for still loving you, it was all for nothing? Not for nothing. Clara's voice broke. For something important. For stopping men who were terrorizing innocent people. For protecting Cole long enough that he could help you bring them down. For... She stopped, the word she wanted to say too big, too impossible. For love. We did it for love. Cole loved this town enough to risk his life going undercover. I loved you enough to sacrifice my reputation, my place here, everything. And you loved justice enough to see it through, even when it cost you. James made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Love. You're talking to me about love. I know I have no right. I know I gave that up when I walked away from that church, but I needed you to know the truth before I... She swallowed hard. Before I leave again. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to understand or to take me back or to pretend the last 5 years didn't happen. I'm just asking you to know that I never betrayed you. Not once. Not ever. She stepped forward and took his hand, pressing the ring into his palm and closing his fingers around it. His hand was warm, calloused, shaking slightly. She held it for a moment, memorizing the feel of his skin against hers, knowing it might be the last time. I should have trusted you, James said, his voice barely audible. 5 years ago, when you didn't show up, when everyone said you'd run off with Cole, I should have known better. I should have trusted that you wouldn't do that to me. You couldn't have known. We made sure no one could know. But I should have. He looked down at their joined hands, at the ring pressed between their palms. I loved you, Clara. I should have trusted that love. Instead, I let anger and hurt convince me you were someone you weren't, and I lived with that anger for 5 years. Let it poison everything, turn me into someone I barely recognize. Clara felt tears spill down her cheeks, hot against her cold skin. We both paid a price. Cole paid the highest price of all. But it's over now. The truth is out, and you can move on. You can find someone who hasn't brought you so much pain. You can have the life you should have had. James pulled his hand away, and for a moment Clara thought he was going to walk away, thought he was going to leave her standing there alone on the platform with nothing but her empty suitcase and her emptier heart. But instead he opened his palm and looked down at the ring. This was my grandmother's, he said. Did I ever tell you that? Clara nodded, unable to speak. She gave it to my grandfather on their wedding day. They were married for 53 years. When she died, my grandfather gave it to me. Said I should give it to a woman I loved enough to spend 53 years with. A woman I'd choose every day, even when things got hard. Especially when things got hard. He closed his fingers around the ring, then looked up at her, and his eyes were clear and bright with unshed tears. I gave this to you because I thought you were that woman, because I believed we'd have those 53 years, that we'd grow old together in that little house by the creek, that we'd watch our children grow and our grandchildren play. And when you left, when I thought you'd chosen someone else, it broke something in me that I didn't think could be fixed. James, but you didn't leave. He continued as if she hadn't spoken. You didn't choose someone else. You chose me. You chose to protect me, to sacrifice everything so I'd be safe, so I could finish what we'd started. And I was too blind, too hurt, too damn stubborn to see it. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the familiar scent of leather and sage, and something uniquely him. Close enough to see the exact moment when the wall he'd built around his heart began to crack. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry I didn't trust you. I'm sorry I let you carry this alone for 5 years. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me, when Cole was dying, when you were running and scared and alone. I'm sorry for all of it. You have nothing to be sorry for. You didn't know. I should have known. He reached up and cupped her face in his free hand, his thumb brushing away her tears. I should have known that the woman I loved wouldn't betray me, that if she disappeared, if she ran, there had to be a reason, a good reason. But I was young and proud and angry, and I let that anger blind me to what my heart was trying to tell me. Clara leaned into his touch, 5 years of loneliness and longing crashing over her like a wave. What do we do now? She whispered. James was quiet for a long moment, his thumb still moving against her cheek in small, soothing circles. Then he lowered his hand and held up the ring, letting it catch the starlight. Now? He said softly. Now I ask you a question I should have asked 5 years ago, before everything went wrong, before plans and secrets and protecting each other got in the way of what really mattered. He went down on one knee right there on the platform, and Clara's breath caught in her throat. Clara Whitmore, he said, his voice steady despite the tears on his face. I lost 5 years with you, 5 years I can never get back. But I don't want to lose one more day. I don't want to lose one more hour. Will you marry me? Not in secret, not as part of a plan, not to protect anyone or hide anything. Just because I love you, just because I've always loved you, just because I can't imagine my life without you in it. The world seemed to stop. The wind ceased its constant rushing. The distant piano fell silent. Even the stars seemed to hold their breath, waiting for her answer. Clara looked down at him. This man who'd hunted outlaws and kept the peace, who'd lived with heartbreak for 5 years and come out the other side still capable of love, still willing to trust, still willing to forgive. This man who was offering her not just a ring, but a future. Not just forgiveness, but a choice. Yes, she said, and the word came out like a prayer, like a promise, like the beginning of something neither of them dared believe could still be possible. Yes, James. Yes to all of it. Yes to you. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit exactly as it had 5 years ago, like it had been waiting all this time to come home. Then he stood and pulled her into his arms, and she buried her face against his chest, feeling his heart pound against her cheek, strong and steady and real. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other on the empty platform while the night grew deeper around them. No words were necessary, no explanations or apologies or plans for the future, just two people who'd found their way back to each other across 5 years of darkness and doubt. Finally, James pulled back just enough to look down at her. The town, he said. They think you're a criminal. They think you ran off with Cole, that you were part of the gang. When they see you with me, I don't care what they think, Clara interrupted. Let them talk. Let them judge. We know the truth now, and that's all that matters. But your reputation was destroyed 5 years ago for a good cause. If it gets destroyed again for loving you, for choosing you, then so be it. She smiled up at him, the first real smile she'd worn in longer than she could remember. Besides, I have a feeling the sheriff of Redemption Bend might be willing to help set the record straight. Maybe tell people about how a brave man named Cole Davidson went undercover to stop a gang, about how the woman they thought was an outlaw was actually protecting their town's greatest secret. James's expression softened. Cole deserves to be remembered as a hero. He deserves that much. Then we'll make sure he is. We'll make sure everyone knows what he sacrificed, what he did for this town. She paused, then added quietly, It's what he would have wanted. In the end, all he cared about was making things right. James nodded slowly. Tomorrow, We'll start clearing your name. Tonight, he glanced toward the dark street beyond the platform. Tonight, I'm taking you home. Home. Clara tested the word, feeling its weight, its possibility. 5 years since she'd had a home. 5 years since she'd had anything but temporary rooms and borrowed beds and the constant need to keep moving. Where's home? The house by the creek, James said. I never could bring myself to sell it, even though it was supposed to be ours, even though every room reminded me of what I'd lost. It's been sitting empty, waiting. Maybe it knew you'd come back. Clara felt fresh tears sting her eyes, but these were different from before. These were tears of relief, of homecoming, of doors opening instead of closing. The house by the creek, she repeated. I used to dream about that house. In the worst times, when Cole was sick and we were running and everything seemed hopeless, I'd close my eyes and imagine sitting on the porch, watching the water flow by. Then let's not waste another moment. James picked up her carpet bag with one hand and took her hand with the other. Let's go home. They walked off the platform together, their footsteps echoing in the quiet night. As they reached the street, Clara looked back once at the depot, the place where she'd arrived, where she'd faced James's anger, where everything had changed. The building sat dark and empty now, already receding into memory. Then she turned forward, toward the man beside her, toward the future they'd both thought was lost, toward whatever came next. And for the first time in 5 years, Clara Whitmore wasn't running away from something. She was running toward it. The walk through Redemption Bend felt like passing through a graveyard of memories. Every storefront, every alley, every lamppost held echoes of the life Clara had left behind. The mercantile where she'd bought fabric for her wedding dress. The bakery where Mrs. Chen had promised to make a 3-tiered cake. The corner where James had first kissed her, both of them young and reckless, and certain the world was theirs for the taking. But the town was different, too. New buildings had sprung up where empty lots once stood. The old saloon had been painted a garish yellow. The church steeple, damaged in a storm years ago, had been repaired with wood that didn't quite match. Change and sameness woven together like a quilt made of mismatched pieces. James kept her hand firmly in his as they walked, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm. Neither spoke. The night wrapped around them like a cocoon, intimate and isolating. Their footsteps on the boardwalk were the only sound besides the distant murmur of voices from the Lucky Dollar Saloon and the occasional bark of a dog. They were halfway down Main Street when a door opened ahead of them. Light spilled out, and a figure emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the deliberate gait of a man who'd spent too many hours in the saddle. The figure paused, then turned toward them. "Sheriff?" The voice was uncertain, curious. "That you?" James's hand tightened on Clara's. "Evening, Roy." Roy Patterson stepped closer, and Clara recognized him. The blacksmith's son, grown into a man in the years she'd been gone. His eyes widened when he saw her face, and she watched the recognition hit him like a physical blow. "Sweet mercy," Roy breathed. "Clara Whitmore?" "It's her," James said, his voice carrying a note of warning. Roy's gaze darted between them, landing on their joined hands, on the carpet bag James carried. His face went through a series of expressions: shock, confusion, something that might have been anger. "But I thought she was—" "She's back," James interrupted. "And she's with me. That's all anyone needs to know tonight." "But Sheriff, after what she did, after she ran off with Roy," James's voice went hard. "Go home. Tell your wife hello from me. And if anyone asks what you saw tonight, you tell them you saw the sheriff walking a lady home. Nothing more. Nothing less. Understood?" Roy opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. Sheriff, folks are going to talk. Let them." James started walking again, pulling Clara gently along. They've been talking for 5 years. One more night won't make a difference. They left Roy standing in the middle of the street, staring after them. Clara could feel his eyes boring into her back, could imagine the thoughts racing through his head. By morning, the whole town would know she was back. By noon, they'd have invented a dozen stories about why. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I didn't think about what this would do to you. Your position, your reputation. My reputation can handle it," James said. "And my position is law enforcement. not popularity contests. If people have a problem with you being here, they can take it up with me. They turned onto Creek Road, leaving the main street behind. The houses grew sparser here, separated by stretches of grassland and scattered cottonwoods. The sound of running water grew louder, the eternal song of Redemption Creek as it wound its way down from the mountains. And then, through the darkness, Clara saw it. The house. It sat on a small rise overlooking the creek, exactly as she remembered. Single story, built of timber and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around three sides. The windows were dark, but even in the starlight she could see the neat lines of it, the careful construction. James had built most of it himself, spending his free hours sawing and hammering and planning for a future he'd thought was certain. Her throat tightened. "You really kept it." "Told you I did." James led her up the path, their boots crunching on gravel. "Couldn't sell it. Tried twice, but every time a buyer showed interest, I'd find some reason to back out. Too attached, I guess. Too hopeful, maybe, even when I told myself I'd given up hope." He climbed the porch steps and pulled a key from his pocket. The door swung open with a creak that spoke of disuse, and James struck a match, lighting a lamp just inside. Warm light bloomed, pushing back the shadows. Clara stepped inside and felt time collapse. The main room looked frozen, preserved like something under glass. The furniture they'd picked out together, the settee with the blue cushions, the oak dining table. The bookshelf James had carved with intricate patterns along its edges. The braided rug her mother had made. The painting of the mountains that had hung in her family's parlor. "You kept everything," she whispered. James set down her carpet bag and closed the door. "I kept hoping you'd need it someday. Kept hoping you'd come home and want to remember. Guess I was right." He moved through the room, lighting more lamps. "It's dusty. I try to clean when I can, but the office keeps me busy, and I'm not much for housekeeping." Clara walked slowly through the space, her fingers trailing over familiar surfaces. The table where they were supposed to eat breakfast together. The chairs where they were supposed to sit by the fire on winter nights. The doorway leading to the bedroom where they were supposed to. She stopped, her hand on the doorframe. She couldn't go in there. Not yet. That room represented too much, too many dreams that had withered on the vine. "Clara." James's voice was soft behind her. "You don't have to. We can figure out sleeping arrangements. I can take the settee, or I can go back to my room above the office. Whatever makes you comfortable." She turned to face him. He stood in the center of the room, lamplight painting him in golden shadow, his hat in his hands, his expression careful, giving her space, giving her choice. This man who'd proposed to her an hour ago was still treating her like something fragile, something that might shatter or flee. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "I'm done running, James. I'm done with temporary and careful and afraid. I came back for you, and I meant it. All of it." Something shifted in his face. Relief, maybe, or the beginning of belief. "Then we'll figure it out together, like we should have 5 years ago." A knock at the door made them both freeze. James's hand went instinctively to his gun before he caught himself. He moved to the door and opened it a crack, his body blocking whoever stood outside from seeing into the room. "Sheriff Cutter." The voice was female, older, edged with concern. "I saw lights. Wanted to make sure everything was all right." "Everything's fine, Mrs. Henderson. Just checking on the house." "At this hour?" There was a pause, then the sound of fabric rustling as the woman tried to peer past him. "Is someone with you?" James sighed. "Mrs. Henderson, I appreciate your concern, but it's her, isn't it?" The woman's voice went sharp. "Roy Patterson's already spreading it around. Said you were walking with Clara Whitmore. Said she's back." Clara stepped forward, coming into view. Mrs. Henderson gasped, her hand flying to her chest. She was older than Clara remembered, her hair more gray than brown now, her face lined with years of prairie sun and hard winters, but her eyes were the same, sharp, assessing, missing nothing. "Mrs. Henderson," Clara said quietly, "you have nerve showing your face here." The woman's voice shook with anger. "After what you did, after what your man did, my husband barely survived that barn fire. Spent weeks recovering, lost half our winter stores, and you dare to come back." "She's not responsible for the fire," James said firmly. or the robbery, or any of it. She ran off with the man who did it. She chose him over you, over this whole town. No. James stepped onto the porch, and Clara saw him square his shoulders, saw him slip into the role of sheriff, authoritative, commanding, brooking no argument. She didn't, and tomorrow I'll be calling a town meeting to explain exactly what happened 5 years ago. But tonight, Mrs. Henderson, you need to go home. Clara is under my protection, and anyone who has a problem with that has a problem with me. Mrs. Henderson drew herself up, indignation radiating from every inch of her small frame. Your father would be ashamed, James Cutter. Sheriff Cutter was a good man, a godly man. He would never have— My father's been dead for 3 years, James interrupted, his voice going cold. And while I respected him, I'm not him. I make my own choices, and I stand by them. Now go home, ma'am, please. The woman stared at him for a long moment, then her gaze shifted to Clara. The hatred there was palpable, years of resentment and loss given form. This town won't forget. We don't forget betrayal. Then it's a good thing she didn't betray anyone, James said. Good night, Mrs. Henderson. He stepped back and closed the door, cutting off whatever the woman had been about to say. In the sudden silence, Clara could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of the confrontation settling over her like a heavy blanket. That's going to happen a lot, isn't it? She said. People angry, people who won't believe the truth even when you tell them. James turned to her, his face weary. Probably. People believe what they want to believe, especially when it's easier than admitting they were wrong. But we'll get through it. We'll make them understand, even if it takes time. Time. Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. We've already lost so much of that. Then we won't waste any more. James crossed to her and took her hands. Listen to me. I don't care what Mrs. Henderson thinks. I don't care what anyone in this town thinks. You're here, you're safe, and you're mine. That's what matters. Yours, Clara repeated softly. The word felt strange on her tongue, weighted with possibility and promise. I haven't been anyone's for so long. Haven't let myself be. It was easier that way, safer, when Cole and I were running. Attachment meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant, You're safe now, James interrupted. You don't have to run anymore. You don't have to be alone. He pulled her closer, until she could rest her forehead against his chest, could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing. I've got you, Clara. I've got you. And I'm not letting go. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the lamplight, while outside, Redemption Bend settled into sleep. Tomorrow would bring challenges, confrontations, the hard work of rebuilding trust and reputation. But tonight, they had this, shelter and warmth and each other. Finally, James pulled back. You should rest. It's been a long day, a long journey. The bedroom's ready. Clean sheets, everything you need. Clara glanced toward the bedroom door again, then back at James. Will you stay? I don't mean— She felt heat rise in her cheeks. I just don't want to be alone. Not tonight. Understanding softened his features. I'll stay. I'll sit in the chair by the window. I'll be right there if you need anything. She nodded, grateful. Together they moved into the bedroom, and Clara was struck again by how preserved it all was. The quilt her grandmother had sewn, the washstand with the porcelain pitcher, the mirror where she was supposed to have pinned up her hair on her wedding morning. James lit the lamp on the bedside table, then settled into the chair by the window, a silent guardian. Clara changed behind the privacy screen, pulling on the nightgown she'd packed, simple white cotton, worn soft from years of use. When she emerged, James was staring out at the darkness, his profile sharp against the window. What are you thinking? She asked, climbing into the bed. The mattress was softer than anything she'd slept on in years. About Cole. James didn't turn from the window. About what it must have been like for him, those 5 years. Carrying that wound, knowing it was killing him slowly. Watching you sacrifice everything to protect a secret he'd helped create. Clara pulled the quilt up to her chin. He never complained. Even at the end, when the pain was so bad he could barely breathe, he never said it wasn't worth it. He believed in what we were doing, believed in you. I wish I could have told him. James's voice was rough. Before he died, I wish I could have told him I understood, that I was grateful, that he was a better man than I gave him credit for. Instead, I hunted him. I put a bullet in him, Clara. I'm the reason he was dying. You were doing your job. You couldn't have known. I should have known. James turned from the window, and in the lamplight, she could see the anguish on his face. I worked with Cole for 2 years before he went undercover. I knew him. I should have seen something, some sign that he wasn't really one of them. But I was so blinded by anger, so convinced that he'd stolen you from me, that I didn't look close enough. Clara sat up. James, listen to me. Cole knew the risks. He chose to take them. And that night, when you caught up to the gang, when the shooting started, Cole made sure you had a clear shot at him. He told me later when we were hiding in that cave that he'd stepped into your line of fire deliberately. He wanted you to be the one to stop him, to give you that closure, even if it cost him his life. James closed his eyes. God, Clara. He cared about you, not just as his superior, but as his friend. Everything he did, everything we both did, was because we believed in you, believed you'd see it through, that you'd make it right. And it cost him everything. He gave everything willingly. Clara's voice was fierce. Don't dishonor that by drowning in guilt. He wanted you to know the truth, wanted you to understand. That's why he kept the ring, why he made me promise to bring it back to you. He wanted you to have a future even if he couldn't. James was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved from the chair and sat on the edge of the bed, his weight making the mattress dip. Tell me about the end, he said softly. Tell me about his last days. Well, Clara took a breath, reaching back into memories she'd tried to bury. We made it to Santa Rosa in late January. Cole was bad by then, fevered, weak, coughing up blood. I got him to a boarding house, told the owner he was my husband, that he'd been hurt in a mining accident. She believed me, or pretended to. She helped me get a doctor. And the doctor? Said what I already knew. The bullet had done damage that couldn't be repaired. The lung was collapsing, infection had spread. Cole had weeks at best, maybe days. She swallowed hard. I stayed with him, sat by his bed, read to him from the Bible when he asked, held his hand when the pain got bad. He drifted in and out, sometimes lucid, sometimes lost in fever dreams. James's hand found hers on the quilt, squeezed gently. 2 days before he died, he had a clear moment. He looked at me and said, I'm sorry I couldn't get you home. I told him it wasn't his fault, that he'd done everything he could, but he shook his head, said he'd made a promise to you that night when you first asked him to go undercover. He'd promised to keep me safe, to bring me back when it was over, and he felt like he'd failed. He didn't fail, James said hoarsely. He brought you back to me. Maybe not the way he planned, but he did it. I told him that. Told him you'd understand, that everything would work out. I don't know if he believed me, but he smiled, and he reached under his pillow and pulled out the ring, said he'd kept it safe all those years, that it was his insurance, his proof that if anything happened to him, I could show you the truth. Clara's voice broke, and she had to pause, had to breathe through the memory of Cole's gaunt face, his labored breathing, the way his hand had trembled as he pressed the ring into her palm. What else did he say? James asked quietly. He said to tell you that he was proud to serve under you, that you were the best man he'd ever known, and that he was sorry he couldn't see the job through to the end. He said, she stopped, tears streaming down her face now. He said that you should marry me properly this time, with the whole town watching, and that you should name your first son Cole, so he'd live on in some small way. James made a sound like a wounded animal. He pulled Clara into his arms, and they held each other while they cried, for Cole, for the years they'd lost, for the price that had been paid for justice and truth. I'll honor that request, James said when he could speak again. When we have a son, we'll name him Cole. We'll tell him about the man he's named for, about his courage and sacrifice. We'll make sure he's remembered as the hero he was. Clara nodded against his chest, unable to form words. They stayed like that until the tears subsided, until breathing came easier. Then James eased her back onto the pillows, pulled the quilt up around her shoulders. Sleep now, he said. I'll be right here. I won't leave. Promise? The word came out small, childlike. Promise. He settled back into the chair but kept his hand on the bed, close enough that she could reach out and touch him if she needed to. Sleep, Clara. You're home now. You're safe. She closed her eyes, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. The bed was soft, the room was warm, and James was there, keeping watch. For the first time in 5 years, she let herself fully relax. Let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the running was really over. Sleep came quickly, pulling her down into darkness. But it wasn't the dreamless sleep of the exhausted. Images flickered through her mind, Cole's face, pale and drawn, the endless miles of running, the fear that had been her constant companion. And then, breaking through like sunlight, James. James waiting at the altar. James tracking the gang. James proposing on the platform. James promising to stay. She stirred, reaching out in the darkness. Her hand found his, and she held on tight. "I'm here," she heard him murmur. "I'm right here." And in her sleep, she smiled. The night deepened around them. Outside, Redemption Creek sang its ancient song. Somewhere in town, people whispered about Clara Whitmore's return, spinning stories and stoking outrage. But in the little house by the creek, two people who'd been lost for 5 years had finally found their way home. The first light of dawn was still hours away, but when it came, it would bring with it the beginning of something new. Not easy, perhaps. Not simple, but real and honest, and built on a foundation of truth that had been tested by fire and found unbreakable. Clara slept, and James watched over her, and the night slowly gave way to morning. And in that quiet house, with the creek murmuring its eternal lullaby, hope took root and began, at last, to grow. When Clara woke, sunlight was streaming through the window, painting the room in shades of gold. She blinked, disoriented for a moment, forgetting where she was. Then memory flooded back, the train, the platform, James. She sat up quickly, looking for him. He was still in the chair, but he'd fallen asleep. His head tilted back, his face relaxed in a way she rarely saw when he was awake. Without the weight of his badge and his responsibilities, he looked younger, more like the man she'd fallen in love with all those years ago. She slipped from the bed, moving quietly so as not to wake him. The floor was cold under her bare feet as she padded to the window and looked out. The creek sparkled in the morning light, its water clear and bright. Beyond it, the mountains rose in purple majesty, their peaks still dusted with snow despite the advancing spring. This view. She'd dreamed about this view, had held it in her heart like a talisman during the darkest times. "You're really here." James's voice was rough with sleep. "For a minute, when I woke up, I thought I'd dreamed it all." Clara turned to find him watching her, his eyes soft. "I'm really here." He stood and crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Together they stood at the window, watching the morning unfold. "We have a town meeting today," he said. "I sent word to the mayor last night. By noon, everyone will be gathered at the church hall. And then we tell them everything." "Everything," he confirmed. "About Cole going undercover. About the plan to bring down the gang from the inside. About why you had to disappear. All of it." Clara leaned back against him. "They won't want to believe it. It's easier to keep thinking I'm the villain, that Cole was a traitor. Then we'll make them believe it. We'll show them the evidence, Cole's reports, the information he gathered, the names of gang members we arrested based on his intelligence. It's all there, Clara. We just have to make them see it." "And if they still won't?" James turned her in his arms so she faced him. "Then we'll deal with it, together. You're not facing this alone anymore." A knock at the door interrupted them. James sighed, pressed a kiss to her forehead, then went to answer it. Clara heard the murmur of voices, then James returned, his expression grim. "That was Deputy Wilson. Apparently there's already a crowd gathering at the church. People are angry, demanding answers. The mayor wants to move the meeting up to 10 o'clock. Clara's stomach tightened. "That's in 2 hours." "I know." James ran a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry. I thought we'd have more time to prepare, to figure out what to say." "We tell them the truth," Clara said, forcing strength into her voice. "We tell them exactly what happened, and we let the facts speak for themselves. The facts don't always matter to angry people. Then we make them matter." She met his eyes. "We owe it to Cole to try. We owe it to ourselves." James studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, but first you need to eat something, and I need to gather the evidence from my office. Can you be ready in an hour? I'll be ready. He kissed her again, longer this time, like he was drawing strength from her presence. Then he grabbed his hat and headed for the door. Lock this behind me, he said. Don't open it for anyone but me. James, please, Clara, I don't trust the mood in town right now. Just stay inside until I get back. She nodded, and he left. She locked the door behind him, then leaned against it, her heart pounding. In 2 hours, she'd face the town that had condemned her. In 2 hours, she'd have to stand up and defend herself, defend Cole, defend everything they'd sacrificed. The weight of it was crushing. But she'd carried heavier burdens. She'd survived 5 years of running, 5 years of fear. She could survive this too. Moving with purpose, Clara washed and dressed, choosing the same gray dress from the night before. It seemed appropriate, somber, respectful, the clothing of a woman in mourning, because she was mourning even now. Mourning the years lost, the future stolen, the price Cole had paid. She was pinning up her hair when she heard voices outside, men's voices, angry and growing louder. She moved to the window and peered out carefully. A group of about a dozen men stood in the road, gesturing toward the house. She recognized some of them, merchants, ranch hands, townspeople she'd known before everything fell apart. "She's in there," one of them shouted, "hiding like the coward she is. We should drag her out, make her answer for what she did. String her up, that's what they do to traitors." Clara's blood went cold. This wasn't just anger, this was mob mentality, dangerous and unpredictable. She backed away from the window, her mind racing. Where was James? How long until he returned? A rock crashed through the window, sending glass spraying across the floor. Clara screamed, covering her face. More rocks followed, and she could hear the men laughing, egging each other on. "Come out, Clara. Face what you've done." She ran to the bedroom looking for something, anything she could use to defend herself. Her hands closed around a fireplace poker just as the front door shuddered under a heavy blow. They were trying to break in. "This is Sheriff Cutter's property," she shouted, hating the tremor in her voice. "You're breaking the law." "The law?" someone yelled back. "You want to talk about the law? Your man killed Deputy Harris, burned down the Henderson barn, robbed the bank." Another blow to the door. The wood splintered. Claire gripped the poker tighter, backing toward the bedroom. Her mind spun with options, each worse than the last. She could try to run out the back, but they'd likely catch her. She could barricade herself in the bedroom, but that would only delay the inevitable. She could... A gunshot split the air. Everything went silent. Then James's voice, cold and commanding. "The next man who touches that door loses more than his hearing. Back away. Now." Clara sagged with relief. She set down the poker and ran to the front room, peering through the broken window. James stood in the middle of the road, his gun drawn, facing down the mob. Deputy Wilson was with him, along with 2 other men she didn't recognize. Deputies maybe, or townsmen loyal to James. "This is my property," James said, his voice carrying easily. "And the woman inside is under my protection. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally. But I promise you, you won't like how that conversation ends." "She's a criminal, Sheriff," one of the men protested. "She's innocent," James shot back. "And at 10 o'clock, I'm going to prove it. Until then, every man here will go home and wait for the facts, or I'll lock you up for destruction of property, disturbing the peace, and attempted assault. Your choice." The men shuffled, uncertain. The fury that had driven them was cooling under James's steady gaze. "Go home," James repeated. "We'll settle this properly, with words and evidence, not rocks and threats. This is still a town of laws, and I'm still the sheriff. Don't make me remind you what that means." Slowly, reluctantly, the men began to disperse. Some muttered threats under their breath. Others looked ashamed. But they went, drifting away in 2s and 3s until the road was empty again. James holstered his gun and strode to the door. Clara unlocked it, and he swept inside, his eyes immediately scanning her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. Scared, but fine." He pulled her against him, and she felt him trembling, with anger, with fear, with relief. "I shouldn't have left you alone. I didn't think they'd move this fast." "It's all right. You're here now." He pulled back, surveying the damage, the broken window, the scattered glass, the splintered door. His jaw tightened. This ends today. One way or another, this ends today. Clara nodded. Then let's finish it. Together they began cleaning up the glass, preparing for whatever came next. Outside, the sun climbed higher, and somewhere a church bell began to toll. 10 o'clock was coming, and with it, the reckoning. The church hall was packed by the time James and Clara arrived. Every pew was filled, people standing along the walls, faces turned toward the entrance, with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. The air was thick with tension and the smell of too many bodies in too small a space. Someone had opened the windows, but the spring breeze did little to ease the suffocating atmosphere. Clara felt every eye on her as James led her down the center aisle, his hand firm on her elbow. Whispers followed in their wake like ripples on water. She kept her chin up, her gaze straight ahead, refusing to let them see her fear. The gray dress she wore felt like armor, and the ring on her finger, visible now to everyone, felt like a declaration of war. Mayor Hutchins stood at the front, his round face red with exertion or emotion or both. Beside him sat Reverend Patterson, his expression carefully neutral, and the town council, 5 men who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Deputy Wilson had taken up position by the door, his hand resting on his gun belt, ready for trouble. James guided Clara to 2 chairs that had been placed facing the congregation, then turned to address the crowd. The room fell silent, waiting. "Thank you all for coming," James began, his voice carrying to every corner. "I know there's been a lot of talk, a lot of anger, about Clara Whitmore's return. I know what many of you believe happened 5 years ago, and I'm here to tell you that almost everything you think you know is wrong." A rumble went through the crowd. Someone shouted, "She ran off with Cole Davidson. We all saw it." "You saw what you were meant to see," James countered. "You saw what had to appear to be true so that a dangerous gang could be brought to justice. But appearances, as I'm about to prove, can be deceiving." Mayor Hutchins cleared his throat. "Sheriff Cutter, perhaps you should start at the beginning. Help us understand what you're claiming." James nodded. He reached into the leather satchel he'd brought and pulled out a stack of papers. 6 years ago, this town and the surrounding county were plagued by a gang of outlaws. They robbed stages, rustled cattle, and generally made life hell for honest folks. Deputy Cole Davidson and I spent months trying to catch them, but they were always one step ahead. It was like they knew our every move. "Because they had someone on the inside," old Timothy Marsh called out from the back. "Everyone knew that. Someone in the sheriff's office was feeding them information." "That's what we thought too," James said. "So we set a trap. Cole volunteered to go undercover, to infiltrate the gang and find out who was betraying us. It took him 8 months, but he did it. He got close to them, earned their trust, and sent me regular reports about their activities." He held up one of the papers. "This is one of those reports, dated November 1869. In it, Cole identifies 3 members of the gang and details their plan to rob a ranch outside of town. We use that information to stop the robbery and arrest 2 of the men." "Anyone can write a report after the fact," someone shouted. "That doesn't prove anything." James's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. "You're right. So let me show you something that can't be fabricated." He pulled out another document, this one official-looking with multiple signatures. This is a letter from the U.S. Marshal's office, dated 2 weeks before the bank robbery. It confirms Cole Davidson's status as an undercover operative and authorizes his actions in pursuit of the gang. He passed the letter to Mayor Hutchins, who examined it closely, his eyebrows rising. The mayor handed it to Reverend Patterson, who read it and nodded slowly. "It appears genuine," the Reverend said quietly. "Of course it's genuine," James said. "Cole was a federal informant working under my direction and with the full knowledge and support of the Marshal's office. Everything he did, every crime he appeared to commit, was part of a sanctioned operation to bring down a dangerous criminal organization." Clara watched the crowd's reaction. Confusion was replacing some of the anger. People were whispering to each other, trying to reconcile what they'd believed with what they were hearing. Mrs. Henderson stood up, her face twisted with fury. "What about my barn? What about my husband, who nearly died in that fire? Was that part of your sanctioned operation?" James's expression softened with regret. "Ma'am, I'm more sorry than I can say about what happened to your property and your husband. But Cole didn't set that fire. One of the gang members did, trying to create a distraction while they robbed the stage on the North Road. Cole tried to stop him, Tried to warn your husband, but he was too late. All he could do was help pull your husband out of the burning building before it collapsed." "That's a lie!" Mrs. Henderson's voice cracked. "Everyone said Cole was there, that he was part of it." "He was there," James confirmed, "but he was there trying to minimize the damage, not cause it. And the man who actually set the fire? His name was Jack Thornton. I tracked him down 3 months later and brought him to justice. He's serving 20 years in the territorial prison for arson and attempted murder." Mrs. Henderson sat down heavily, her face pale. Her husband reached over and took her hand. James continued, his voice growing stronger. "The bank robbery was supposed to be our final operation. Cole had gathered enough evidence to arrest the entire gang. We planned to let them attempt the robbery, then catch them in the act with stolen money in hand. It should have been clean, simple, decisive. But Deputy Harris wasn't supposed to be there that night. He'd changed his patrol route without telling anyone." Deputy Wilson spoke up from the back. "I remember that. Harris told me he had a feeling something was wrong, that he wanted to check on the bank. I told him to go ahead. And when he walked in on the robbery in progress, everything went to hell," James said. "One of the gang members panicked and fired. The bullet that killed Harris was meant for Cole, who'd been trying to stop the shooting. Cole was hit in the shoulder, barely escaped with his life." Clara felt the weight of every eye in the room shift to her. James glanced at her, and she nodded. This was her part of the story. She stood, her legs trembling but her voice steady. "That same night, Cole came to me. He was bleeding, barely conscious. He told me what had happened, told me that the gang was scattering and that some of them suspected he was the informant. He said I was in danger, that anyone connected to James would be targeted for revenge." "So you ran," Mayor Hutchins said, but his tone was less accusatory now, more questioning. "I ran to protect James," Clara said. "If I'd married him that morning, if I'd become the sheriff's wife, the gang would have known for certain that Cole had been working with law enforcement. They would have killed Cole immediately, and they would have come after James. So I made a choice. I chose to disappear, to let everyone think I'd chosen Cole over James, that I was part of the gang." "For 5 years?" someone asked incredulously. "You kept up this deception for 5 years?" "We had no choice." Claire's voice broke slightly, but she pushed on. "The gang had someone in the sheriff's office feeding them information. We didn't know who we could trust. Every time we tried to make contact with James, someone would find us. We barely escaped with our lives 3 times. James picked up the thread. "The man in my office was Deputy Arthur Marshall. He'd been on the gang's payroll from the beginning. I didn't discover his betrayal until 2 years ago, and by then he'd fled to Oregon. He was arrested last year on unrelated charges and confessed to everything, including his role in tipping off the gang whenever Cole tried to reach me." He pulled out another document. "This is Marshall's confession. In it, he names every member of the gang, details every crime they committed, and confirms Cole Davidson's role as an informant. He also confirms that Clara Whitmore was never involved in any criminal activity, that she was simply trying to stay alive and protect the people she loved." The room was silent now, the weight of revelation settling over everyone like snow. Clara could see the doubt creeping into faces that had been set with certainty moments before. Reverend Patterson stood. "Sheriff Cutter, why didn't you come forward with this information sooner? Why let people believe lies for so long?" "Because I didn't know the truth myself until yesterday," James said, and Clara heard the pain in his voice. "I believed the same lies everyone else did. I thought Clara had betrayed me. I thought Cole had turned criminal. I spent 5 years hating them both for something they never did." He looked at Clara, and she saw tears standing in his eyes. "I was wrong, and I'm asking this town to help me make it right, to see Clara and Cole for who they really were, heroes who sacrificed everything to bring criminals to justice." Old Timothy Marsh stood up, leaning heavily on his cane. "That's a fine story, Sheriff, real touching. But you got any proof beyond some papers and your say-so? Because papers can be forged, and a man in love might say anything to protect his woman." James's face hardened. "You want proof? Fine. Deputy Wilson, bring him in." Wilson opened the door and gestured to someone outside. A moment later, a man entered, tall, weathered, wearing the badge of a U.S. Marshal. Clara didn't recognize him, but clearly others in the room did. There were gasps, murmurs of recognition. "Marshal Crane, Mayor Hutchins said, standing. "We didn't expect you." "Mayor," the marshal nodded. "I came as soon as Sheriff Cutter sent word that Miss Whitmore had returned. I have some things to say that this town needs to hear." He moved to the front of the room, his boots striking the wooden floor with authority. "My name is Robert Crane, U.S. Marshal for the Montana Territory. 6 years ago, I personally recruited Cole Davidson for an undercover operation targeting the Davidson Gang. Yes, they took his name as a joke, as a way to thumb their noses at law enforcement. Cole spent nearly 2 years embedded with that organization, gathering evidence and intelligence at great personal risk." The marshal's voice carried the weight of absolute truth. Cole Davidson was one of the bravest men I've ever known. He gave up his reputation, his safety, and ultimately his life to protect this community. And Clara Whitmore sacrificed just as much. She could have stayed safe, could have married Sheriff Cutter, and lived a normal life. Instead, she chose to protect the man she loved and the operation that was keeping this town safe. "Why should we believe you?" Mrs. Henderson's voice was quieter now, but still skeptical. "You're a lawman. You could be covering for them." Marshal Crane reached into his coat and pulled out a small book, bound in leather and worn from use. "This is Cole Davidson's journal. He kept it during his time undercover, documenting everything, every meeting with the gang, every crime they planned, every piece of intelligence he gathered. Miss Whitmore gave it to me yesterday evening, along with other evidence she'd been safeguarding." He opened the journal and read, "March 15th, 1870. The gang is planning to hit the Henderson Ranch. They want to burn the barn as a distraction while they rob the stage. I've sent word to James, but I have to be there when it happens to maintain my cover. God forgive me for what I have to let happen. I'll do everything I can to minimize the damage, but people may get hurt, and it will be my fault for not stopping it sooner." The marshal looked up. "Mrs. Henderson, your husband nearly died that night, but he would have died if Cole hadn't pulled him from the fire. 3 witnesses saw Cole drag your husband to safety, then try to fight the flames until the gang forced him to leave. He saved your husband's life, ma'am, and you've spent 5 years hating him for it." Mrs. Henderson's face crumpled. Her husband put his arm around her as she began to cry. Marshal Crane continued reading from the journal, entry after entry detailing Cole's struggle to maintain his cover while trying to protect innocent people. The room listened in stunned silence as the truth unfolded, undeniable and heartbreaking. "The night of the bank robbery," the marshal said, "Cole wrote this. Tomorrow we end this. Tomorrow the gang hits the bank, and James will be waiting. Tomorrow I can finally stop pretending, can finally help Clara marry the man she loves. Tomorrow we can all stop living this lie. But I'm afraid something will go wrong. Afraid I've led Clara and James into danger they can't escape. If something happens to me, I pray they find happiness together. They deserve that much after all they've sacrificed." The marshal closed the journal. Something did go wrong. Deputy Harris died, and Cole was wounded, a wound that eventually killed him 5 years later. But even then, even dying, Cole's last thoughts were of making sure the truth came out, that Clara could come home, that she and Sheriff Cutter could have the life they'd earned. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. Hearing Cole's words, his fears and hopes laid bare, was almost more than she could bear. James's hand found hers, squeezing tight. "This town owes Cole Davidson an apology," Marshal Crane said, his voice stern, "and it owes Clara Whitmore the same. These 2 people gave up everything, reputation, home, future, to keep you safe. And you repaid them with hatred and judgment." Mayor Hutchins stood slowly. "Marshal, Sheriff, Miss Whitmore, I think I speak for everyone here when I say we're overwhelmed. This is a lot to take in." "It is," James agreed, "but it's the truth. Every word of it." Reverend Patterson rose and walked to Clara. She tensed, unsure what to expect, but the Reverend simply took her hands in his. "My dear child," he said softly, "I am so very sorry. We all are. Can you ever forgive us?" The question hung in the air. Clara looked out at the sea of faces, some ashamed, some still uncertain, some openly crying. These were her people, her community. They'd turned on her based on appearances, had judged her without knowing the full story. But they'd also been victims of deception, caught up in something they couldn't have understood. "There's nothing to forgive," she said, her voice thick with emotion. You believed what you saw. You believed what made sense based on the information you had. I don't blame you for that. I only ask that now, knowing the truth, you let me come home. Let Cole's sacrifice mean something. Let him be remembered as the hero he was. Here! Here! Someone called out. Others took up the cry. Soon the whole room was filled with voices agreeing, affirming, accepting. Old Timothy Marsh struggled to his feet again. I got something to say. The room quieted. I knew Cole Davidson since he was a boy. Watched him grow up, saw him become a deputy. And I never once saw him do a dishonest thing until the night of that robbery. It never sat right with me, him turning bad so sudden. But I believed it because everyone else did, because it was easier than questioning. He looked at Clara. I'm ashamed of that. Ashamed I didn't trust what I knew of his character. Miss Whitmore, I hope you can forgive an old fool. I already have, Mr. Marsh, Clara said. Others began to stand, offering apologies, expressing regret. Mrs. Henderson came forward, her face blotchy from crying. I'm so sorry, she whispered to Clara. I'm so sorry. He saved my husband, and I've spent 5 years cursing his name. Clara embraced her, feeling the woman's body shake with sobs. He would have forgiven you, she said. He understood why people believed what they did. He never blamed anyone but the gang and the circumstances. The dam had broken. People pressed forward, wanting to apologize, to welcome Clara home, to express their shame and regret. James stayed close, his hand never leaving hers, anchoring her as the tide of emotion threatened to overwhelm them both. Mayor Hutchins called for order. Friends, I think we can all agree that a great injustice has been done, not by us knowingly, but an injustice nonetheless. I propose we take action to make amends. First, we should erect a monument to Cole Davidson in the town square, honoring his service and sacrifice. Second, we should publicly clear Clara Whitmore's name and welcome her back to our community with open arms. Third, we should establish a fund to help Miss Whitmore rebuild her life here, to compensate in some small way for all she's lost. I don't need compensation, Clara said quickly. I just need to be home. Nevertheless, the mayor insisted, it's the right thing to do. All in favor? A chorus of ayes filled the room. Then it's settled. Mayor Hutchins smiled. Welcome home, Miss Whitmore. We're grateful to have you back. The meeting dissolved into smaller conversations, people clustering in groups to discuss everything they'd learned. James guided Clara toward the door, clearly eager to escape the crush of bodies and emotion. They were almost outside when a voice stopped them. Sheriff Cutter, Miss Whitmore. A moment, please. They turned to find Marshal Crane approaching, Cole's journal still in his hand. I wanted to give you this, he said to Clara, holding out the journal. It belongs with you, I think. The official evidence has been recorded, but the personal parts... Clara clutched the journal to her chest, feeling the weight of it, the history contained in its pages. Are you all right? James asked softly. I don't know, she admitted. I thought I'd feel relief. Vindication, maybe. But all I feel is tired. So incredibly tired. Then let's go home. Let's leave all this behind for a while and just be. They stepped out into the spring sunshine. The street was quieter now, peaceful. A few people nodded to them as they passed, respect and apology in their eyes. The town that had rejected Clara was slowly, tentatively opening its arms to welcome her back. They walked in silence until they reached the house by the creek. The broken window had been boarded up. Deputy Wilson's doing, probably. Inside, everything was as they'd left it, quiet and waiting. James closed the door and pulled Clara into his arms. She went willingly, burying her face in his chest, letting the tears finally come. All the fear, all the tension, all the years of holding herself together while the world thought the worst of her, it all came pouring out. I've got you, James murmured, holding her tight. I've got you, and I'm never letting go. They stood like that for a long time, healing in each other's arms. Outside, Redemption Creek sang its eternal song. Above, the sun climbed higher in a brilliant blue sky. And in the little house where their dreams had once died, those dreams were slowly, carefully coming back to life. When Clara's tears finally subsided, she pulled back and wiped her eyes. "I should read it," she said, holding up the journal. "I should know what he wrote, what he was thinking all those years." "Are you sure? It might be painful." "I need to know. I need to understand what he went through, what he sacrificed." She moved to the settee and sat down, opening the journal with careful hands. James sat beside her, close enough to offer comfort, but giving her space to process. Clara began to read, her eyes scanning Cole's familiar handwriting. The first entries were matter-of-fact, documenting his initial contact with the gang, his strategies for gaining their trust. But as the months wore on, the entries became more personal, more anguished. "Listen to this," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's from December 1869, 3 months before the wedding." He writes, "Saw Clara and James together today. They were looking at the house by the creek, planning where to put furniture, what color to paint the walls. The happiness on their faces was like sunlight, and I'm the shadow that's going to steal it all away. I know it's necessary. I know we're doing the right thing. But God, it hurts to know what's coming, to know the pain they'll both suffer because of choices I've made." James closed his eyes. He knew. Even then, he knew what it would cost. Clara turned the pages, reading silently until another passage caught her attention. This is from the week before the wedding. He says, "I've tried to find another way. I've lain awake every night searching for a solution that doesn't require Clara to sacrifice everything. But there isn't one. The gang is suspicious, watching everything. If Clara marries James as planned, they'll know I betrayed them. They'll kill me, they'll kill James, they might even hurt Clara. So tomorrow I have to ask her to do the impossible. I have to ask her to run away with me, to let everyone think she chose me over James, to destroy her reputation and break the heart of the man she loves. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I'm strong enough to ask this of her." "But he did ask," James said quietly. "And you said yes." "I didn't hesitate," Clara said. "When he came to me, explained everything, I knew immediately that I'd do it. Not because I wanted to, but because it was the only way to keep you safe, to keep you alive." She looked at James, her eyes bright with tears. "I loved you too much to let you die for justice. Better to let you hate me and live than love me and end up in a grave." James took her face in his hands. "I could never hate you, even when I thought you'd betrayed me, even when I was angrier than I'd ever been. Underneath it all was love. It never went away, Clara. Never." They kissed, gentle and sweet, a reaffirmation of everything they'd found again. When they parted, Clara returned to the journal, reading passage after passage that detailed Cole's inner struggle, his guilt over the deception, his hope that someday the truth would come out. She found an entry from the night of the bank robbery, written in shaky handwriting that spoke of Cole's pain and fear. "It's done. Harris is dead, killed by a bullet that was meant for me. The gang scattered, and I'm running with Clara, trying to stay alive long enough to see this through. But I'm wounded worse than I've let on. The bullet hit something vital. I can feel it every time I breathe. I don't know how long I have, but I'll use whatever time remains to keep Clara safe, to make sure she can go home eventually. It's the least I can do after everything she sacrificed." Clara's hands shook as she turned to the final entries, written in New Mexico as Cole's life ebbed away. The handwriting was barely legible, the words sometimes trailing off as if he'd lost the strength to continue. "The end is close. I can feel it in my bones, in the way each breath is harder than the last. I've asked Clara to take the ring back to James, to tell him everything. I've asked her to make sure he knows the truth, that she never betrayed him, that I never turned criminal. It's all I have left to give them, the truth, and the hope that they can build the life I destroyed. If you're reading this, James, if Clara managed to get this to you, then please forgive her, forgive me, and for God's sake marry her properly this time. Love her the way she deserves to be loved. Name a son after me so I can live on in some small way. And be happy. Be happy for all three of us, because at least then this sacrifice will have meant something." Clara closed the journal, unable to continue. Tears streamed down her face, and James pulled her close, his own eyes wet. They held each other while the afternoon light slanted through the windows, while the creek murmured its timeless song, while Cole's words settled over them like a benediction. "We'll honor his requests," James said finally. "All of them. We'll marry properly, with the whole town watching. We'll name our first son Cole. And we'll be happy, Clara. will be so damn happy that his sacrifice won't have been in vain. I want that, Clara whispered. I want it so much, but I'm afraid, James. Afraid that after everything, we won't know how. That the weight of the past will be too heavy to carry into the future. Then we'll learn together. We'll take it one day at a time, one moment at a time. And when it gets hard, when the memories threaten to pull us under, we'll hold on to each other and remember why we're here. Why Cole did what he did. Why you sacrificed what you did. Clara nodded against his chest. When? She asked. When should we marry? As soon as possible. Tomorrow, if Reverend Patterson can arrange it. I don't want to wait another day, another hour. I've lost too much time with you already. Tomorrow, Clara agreed. Let's get married tomorrow. James stood and pulled her to her feet. Then we have preparations to make. We need to talk to the Reverend, arrange for witnesses, get you a proper dress. I don't need a fancy dress, Clara interrupted. I just need you. You deserve a fancy dress. You deserve everything, Clara. Let me give you this at least. Let me give you the wedding we should have had 5 years ago. She smiled through her tears. All right, but nothing too elaborate. Just something simple and beautiful, like this. She gestured around the room at the simple furniture and homey touches. Like us. Simple and beautiful, James agreed. I can manage that. They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, sending word to the Reverend, talking about flowers and food and all the small details that made a wedding special. It felt surreal, discussing napkin colors and guest lists after everything they'd been through. But it also felt right, felt healing, like they were reclaiming something that had been stolen from them. As evening approached, James heated water for a bath, while Clara sorted through the trunk of clothes she'd left behind 5 years ago. Most didn't fit anymore. She'd lost too much weight during the years of running, but she found a simple blue dress that could work with a few alterations. She was holding it up to the light when there was a knock at the door. James answered it, and Clara heard female voices. A moment later, 3 women entered. Mrs. Chen from the bakery, Abigail Wilson, the deputy's wife, and Sarah Hutchins, the mayor's daughter. We heard you're getting married tomorrow, Mrs. Chen said, her round face beaming. We've come to help you prepare. Clara was overwhelmed. You don't have to... Hush, Abigail said firmly. You've spent 5 years with no one to help you, no one to lean on. Let us be here for you now. Let us help make tomorrow special. Sarah held up a wrapped bundle. I brought my wedding dress. We're about the same size, and it's just been sitting in a trunk gathering dust. I'd be honored if you'd wear it. Tears pricked Clara's eyes again. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Mrs. Chen urged. Say yes and let us fuss over you the way we should have 5 years ago. Yes, Clara whispered. Yes, please. I'd like that very much. The women swept into action, unwrapping the dress, discussing alterations, planning hair and flowers. James caught Clara's eye and smiled, then quietly slipped out to give them space. Through the window, Clara saw him heading toward town, probably to make his own preparations. As the women worked, chattering and laughing, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the simple joy of female companionship, of being part of a community, of belonging. These women were giving her more than help with a wedding. They were giving her a place, a home, a future. Thank you, she said softly. All of you. For coming here, for helping, for believing the truth. Mrs. Chen squeezed her hand. We're the ones who should be thanking you, dear. You and Cole both. You kept us safe, and we repaid you with judgment. It's time we made that right. The evening passed in a flurry of pins and lace, laughter and stories. The women shared town gossip, caught Clara up on births and deaths and marriages, wove her back into the fabric of Redemption Bend one story at a time. And slowly, piece by piece, Clara began to believe that she really could come home, that the past could be healed, that tomorrow might truly be the beginning of something new. When the women finally left, promising to return early the next morning, Clara stood alone in the quiet house wearing Sarah's wedding dress. It fit nearly perfectly, white lace and silk that caught the lamplight and seemed to glow. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw not the hunted, haunted woman who'd stepped off the train, but someone else. Someone who looked like she might deserve happiness after all. James returned an hour later to find her still in the dress, standing by the window watching the stars come out. He He stopped in the doorway, his breath catching. "Clara," he said, his voice reverent, "you're beautiful." She turned to him, and the look in his eyes made her heart soar. "Tomorrow," she said, "tomorrow I marry you, really marry you. No secrets, no deceptions, no running, just us and the truth and whatever future we can build together." "Tomorrow," he agreed, "and every day after that, for the rest of our lives." He crossed to her and took her hands, and they stood together in the lamplight, two people who'd found their way back from the darkness, ready at last to step into the light. Morning arrived with the kind of clarity that only spring in Montana could offer. The sky stretched endless and blue, unmarred by clouds, while the mountains stood sentinel in the distance, their peaks still crowned with snow that sparkled in the early light. Clara woke to the sound of birdsong and the eternal murmur of the creek, and for a moment she simply lay there, letting the reality of the day wash over her. Today she would marry James Cutter, really marry him this time. She rose and moved to the window, looking out at the world that was slowly becoming hers again. The morning mist was lifting from the creek, revealing the clear water rushing over smooth stones. A deer stood on the far bank, drinking cautiously, its ears alert for danger. Everything seemed touched with magic, as if the world itself was celebrating. A soft knock came at the bedroom door, and James's voice filtered through. "You awake?" "I am," she called back. "I'm heading into town early. Mrs. Chen and the others will be here soon to help you get ready. I'll see you at the church." There was a pause, then his voice came again, softer. "I love you, Clara." Her heart swelled. "I love you too." She heard his footsteps retreating, then the sound of the front door closing. Alone again, Clara moved through the house, touching familiar objects, reacquainting herself with the space that would now truly be her home. The morning light made everything glow, the blue cushions on the settee, the books on the shelf, the photographs James had hung on the walls. She stopped at one photograph, a formal portrait of a stern-looking couple. James's parents, she realized. His father in his sheriff's uniform, his mother in her Sunday best. They'd both died before Clara and James had met, but she knew James had loved them deeply, had tried to live up to their example. "I'll try to make him happy," she whispered to the photograph. "I'll try to be worthy of him." As if in answer, a beam of sunlight fell across the frame, warming it. Clara was still standing there when she heard the sound of a wagon approaching. Through the window, she saw Mrs. Chen, Abigail, and Sarah climbing down, their arms full of parcels and baskets. Behind them came two more wagons, one carrying flowers, the other laden with what looked like food. She opened the door to greet them, and the women swept in like a benevolent storm, filling the house with chatter and energy. "Good morning, bride," Mrs. Chen sang out. "Are you ready for the most important day of your life?" "I think so," Clara said, though her hands were trembling slightly. "I'm nervous." "That's natural," Abigail assured her. "Every bride is nervous, but trust me, the moment you see James waiting for you at that altar, all the nerves will disappear. There'll be only him and the life you're about to build together." Sarah was already unpacking the wedding dress, shaking out the wrinkles and examining it critically. "It held up well overnight, just needs a quick pressing. Clara, you go bathe while we set up. We'll have everything ready when you're done." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Clara bathed in water scented with lavender, dried her hair by the fire while the women chatted and worked around her. They'd brought breakfast, fresh bread and jam, eggs cooked perfectly, coffee strong enough to chase away any lingering drowsiness. Clara ate mechanically, tasting nothing, her mind already at the church where James was waiting. When it came time to dress, the women helped her into layers of undergarments, a chemise, a corset that they laced with gentle hands, petticoats that rustled as she moved. Then came the dress itself, slipping over her head in a waterfall of white silk and lace. Sarah fastened the buttons up the back, her fingers quick and sure. "There," she said, stepping back. "Look at yourself." Clara turned to the mirror and gasped. The woman looking back at her was transformed. The dress fit perfectly, emphasizing her small waist, the lace sleeves delicate against her skin. Her dark hair had been arranged in soft curls, pinned up with small white flowers. Her face, though still showing signs of the hardship she'd endured, glowed with something that might have been hope. "You're beautiful," Abigail breathed. absolutely beautiful. Mrs. Chen pressed a handkerchief into Clara's hand. For happy tears, she said with a knowing smile. There was a knock at the door, and Mayor Hutchins entered, his face breaking into a wide smile when he saw Clara. Miss Whitmore, or should I say, soon to be Mrs. Cutter, you look radiant. The wagon is ready whenever you are. Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was real. This was happening. After 5 years of waiting, of hoping, of holding on to a love that everyone said was dead, she was finally going to marry the man who'd held her heart since the first moment she'd seen him. I'm ready, she said. The women gathered around her, making final adjustments, offering last words of encouragement. Then Mrs. Chen handed her a bouquet, wildflowers mixed with roses, tied with a white ribbon. These are from James, she said. He picked them himself this morning. Clara brought the flowers to her face, breathing in their sweet scent. Of course James had picked them himself. He'd always been that way, thoughtful in small gestures, showing his love in quiet actions rather than grand pronouncements. Mayor Hutchins offered his arm. Shall we? They processed out to the wagon, which had been decorated with ribbons and more flowers. The women climbed in beside Clara, arranging her dress carefully so it wouldn't wrinkle. Then the wagon lurched into motion, carrying them toward town and toward the future that waited there. The ride felt both endless and far too short. Clara's hands twisted the ribbon on her bouquet, her heart hammering against her ribs. What if something went wrong? What if the town had changed its mind overnight, decided they didn't believe the truth after all? What if— Stop, Abigail said gently, taking Clara's hand. I can see you spiraling. Everything is going to be perfect. The whole town is waiting to celebrate with you, to welcome you home properly. She's right, Sarah added. I was at the Mercantile this morning, and everyone was talking about the wedding. They're happy for you, Clara. Truly happy. As they approached the church, Clara could see she was right. The street was lined with people, men, women, children, all dressed in their Sunday best, all smiling and waving as the wagon passed. Someone had strung flowers along the church fence. The doors stood open and she could see more people inside, filling every pew. The wagon stopped and Mayor Hutchins helped Clara down, careful with her dress. The women fussed around her one last time. Then Mrs. Chen squeezed her hand and hurried inside to take her seat. Ready? The mayor asked. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Together they walked toward the church entrance, and with each step, Clara felt the past falling away. The fear, the running, the years of pretending to be someone she wasn't, all of it was dissolving like morning mist under the sun. They reached the entrance and Clara paused, looking inside. The church was packed, every seat filled, people standing along the walls. Flowers adorned every surface, their fragrance mixing with the smell of wood polish and candle wax. And at the front, standing beside Reverend Patterson, was James. He was dressed in a black suit she'd never seen before, his hair neatly combed, his face clean-shaven. But it was his expression that made her breath catch, a mixture of love and wonder and relief so profound it brought tears to her eyes. He was looking at her like she was the answer to every prayer he'd ever prayed, the fulfillment of every dream he'd ever dreamed. The organ began to play, the familiar wedding march filling the church. Mayor Hutchins patted her hand. Here we go. They began to walk down the aisle, and Clara was aware of faces turning toward her, of smiles and nods of approval, of Mrs. Henderson dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. But she couldn't focus on any of them. Her eyes were locked on James, and his were locked on her, and the distance between them was closing with each step. When they reached the front, Mayor Hutchins placed her hand in James's, and the touch sent electricity racing through her. James's fingers closed around hers, warm and strong and sure. Dearly beloved, Reverend Patterson began, his voice resonant in the hushed church. We are gathered here today to witness the union of James Robert Cutter and Clara May Whitmore in holy matrimony. This is a day of great joy, not just for these two souls, but for our entire community. For in joining these two together, we are healing wounds, righting wrongs, and affirming that love, true love, can survive any trial. Clara barely heard the opening words of the ceremony. She was lost in James's eyes, in the feel of his hand holding hers, in the reality of standing here beside him after so many years of absence. Marriage, the Reverend continued, is not just a union of two people, but a sacred covenant before God and community. It requires love, yes, but also forgiveness, patience, and unwavering commitment. James and Clara have already proven they possess these qualities. They have forgiven when others would have held grudges. They have been patient when others would have given up. And their commitment to each other has survived distance, deception, and doubt. He looked at the congregation. Let their example remind us all that love is not just a feeling, but a choice to stand by someone even when it's hard, to believe in them even when the world says otherwise, to hold on to hope even when it seems foolish to do so. Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. These were the happy tears Mrs. Chen had predicted, tears of release and relief and overwhelming joy. "James," Reverend Patterson said, turning to him, "do you take Clara to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part?" "I do." James's voice was steady, certain, ringing clear through the church. "I absolutely do. And Clara, do you take James to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part?" "I do," Clara said, her voice breaking with emotion. "With all my heart, I do. The rings, please." Deputy Wilson stepped forward. James had asked him to serve as best man and handed the Reverend 2 gold bands. Clara recognized one immediately, the silver ring James had given her 5 years ago, now polished to a gleam, but beside it was a matching band clearly made to go with it. Reverend Patterson handed the silver ring to James. "This ring is a symbol of unbroken love, a promise that has endured despite every obstacle. James, place this ring on Clara's finger and repeat after me. With this ring, I thee wed." James took Clara's left hand, where the ring had rested the night before, and slid it onto her finger once more. "With this ring, I thee wed, and with all that I am and all that I have, I pledge myself to you, today, tomorrow, and forever." The Reverend handed the second ring to Clara. "Clara, place this ring on James's finger and repeat after me. With this ring, I thee wed." Clara's hands trembled as she took James's hand and slipped the ring onto his finger. "With this ring, I thee wed. And with all that I am and all that I have, I pledge myself to you, today, tomorrow, and forever." Reverend Patterson smiled. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Montana and by God Almighty, I now pronounce you husband and wife. James, you may kiss your bride." James didn't hesitate. He pulled Clara into his arms and kissed her, and the church erupted in applause and cheers. The kiss was tender and passionate and full of promise, a sealing of vows that had been 5 years in the making. When they finally broke apart, both were crying, both were smiling, and the love between them was so palpable it seemed to fill the entire church. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reverend Patterson called out over the noise, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. James Cutter." The applause grew louder. James took Clara's hand and turned to face the congregation, and together they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife. People reached out to touch them, to offer congratulations, to share in their happiness. Clara saw familiar faces beaming at her, old friends who'd welcomed her back, new friends who'd helped make this day possible. Outside, the spring sunshine felt like a benediction. Someone had prepared a wagon decorated with flowers and ribbons, and James helped Clara up before climbing beside her. The crowd gathered around, throwing rice and flower petals, their laughter and joy creating a symphony of celebration. "To the town hall," Mayor Hutchins shouted. "The reception awaits." The wagon lurched into motion, and as they rode through the streets of Redemption Bend, Clara marveled at the transformation. Just 2 days ago, she'd arrived to anger and suspicion. Now she was riding through the same streets as a bride, welcomed and celebrated, heading toward a future that finally felt possible. James's arm was around her shoulders, holding her close. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. "Happier than I ever thought I could be," she answered honestly. The town hall had been transformed. Tables groaned under the weight of food, roasted meats, fresh bread, pies, and cakes of every variety. Someone had set up a small platform for musicians, and already the sound of a fiddle was tuning up. Flowers decorated every surface, and in the corner, a table held an impressive wedding cake, 3 tiers tall and decorated with delicate sugar flowers. As Clara and James entered, the crowd burst into applause again. Mayor Hutchins raised his glass. "A toast," he called out. "To James and Clara Cutter. May their love be as enduring as these mountains, as constant as Redemption Creek, and as bright as this Montana sky." "Here, here," the crowd echoed, raising their own glasses. The celebration began in earnest. Music filled the hall as couples took to the dance floor. James led Clara into the first dance, holding her close as they swayed to a waltz. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling the strength in his arms around her. "I can't believe this is real," she murmured. "After everything. After all the years of thinking this day would never come." "It's real," James assured her. "You're here, I'm here, and we're married. Nothing and no one can change that." They danced in silence for a moment, then James spoke again. "I was thinking about Cole this morning, wishing he could be here to see this." "He is here," Clara said softly. "I feel it. He's here and he's happy for us. This is what he wanted, what he fought for." "We'll honor him," James promised. "The monument, the child we'll name after him, we'll make sure his sacrifice is never forgotten." The dance ended, and others came to claim them. Mayor Hutchins wanting to dance with the bride, Mrs. Chen insisting James dance with her daughter. Clara found herself passed from partner to partner, each offering congratulations and welcome. The town was embracing her fully now, weaving her back into the fabric of their community. She was dancing with old Timothy Marsh, who was surprisingly spry despite his cane, when she noticed a commotion at the entrance. A stranger had entered, a woman, travel-worn and dusty, carrying a small case. She was looking around the hall with an expression of confusion and uncertainty. Clara excused herself from the dance and made her way toward the woman. Up close, she could see the stranger was young, maybe 20, with blonde hair and tired blue eyes. "Can I help you?" Clara asked gently. The woman jumped, startled. I'm looking for Sheriff Cutter. I was told he'd be here." "I'm his wife," Clara said, still marveling at the words. "Is something wrong?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know. I hope not. I've come a long way with a message, and I need to deliver it to him personally." Clara felt a prickle of unease. "What kind of message?" Before the woman could answer, James appeared at Clara's side. "Is there a problem?" The stranger turned to him. "Sheriff Cutter, I'm Emma Davidson. I'm Cole Davidson's sister." The world seemed to tilt. Clara felt James's hand find hers, gripping tight. Cole had never mentioned a sister, had never spoken of any family beyond his parents, who died when he was young. "His sister," James repeated carefully. "We didn't know Cole had a sister." "We've been estranged for years," Emma said. "Our father disapproved of Cole's choice to become a lawman, and when I sided with father, Cole and I stopped speaking. I didn't even know he'd gone undercover, didn't know about any of it until a few weeks ago." "How did you find out?" Clara asked. Emma reached into her case and pulled out a letter. "This arrived at my home in San Francisco. It's from a lawyer in New Mexico, a man named Gerald Sutton. He wrote to inform me of Cole's death and to tell me that Cole had left something for me, something he wanted me to deliver to you." She held out the letter, and James took it, his hands shaking slightly. Clara read over his shoulder, her heart pounding. The letter was brief, formal, explaining that Cole Davidson had died in Santa Rosa, New Mexico, and had left specific instructions for his effects to be delivered to his sister, who was then to bring them to Sheriff James Cutter in Redemption Bend, Montana. "What did he leave?" James asked, his voice rough. Emma reached into her case again and pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. "This. The lawyer said Cole had been keeping it since before he went undercover. He said it was insurance, proof of something important. He wanted you to have it, Sheriff, you and your wife." James took the envelope with trembling hands. On the front, in Cole's handwriting, were the words, "For James and Clara, the whole truth so no one can ever doubt." The noise of the party faded into the background as James carefully opened the envelope. Inside were several documents, official reports, signed statements, and at the bottom a letter in Cole's handwriting. James unfolded the letter and read aloud, his voice barely steady. James, if you're reading this, then I'm dead, and Emma has done what I asked. I'm sorry for that. Sorry to burden her with this task. Sorry that my death has brought you pain. But I need you to have these documents. They're proof of everything. My recruitment by the marshal's office, my undercover work, the intelligence I gathered. But more than that, they're proof of Clara's innocence. He paused, swallowing hard, then continued. The documents include a signed statement from me, witnessed and notarized, explaining that Clara Whitmore had no knowledge of my undercover work until the night of the bank robbery, that she was coerced into helping me, threatened with harm to you if she didn't comply, that every action she took was to protect you and to protect the integrity of the operation. No one can ever claim she was complicit in any crime. No one can ever say she chose me over you. This is the proof, James. The absolute, irrefutable proof. Clara felt her knees weaken, and James's arm came around her, supporting her. He continued reading. I'm also including a full accounting of the gang's crimes, names of all members, and evidence of their activities. Use it to make sure justice is served, to make sure no one escapes punishment, but most importantly, use it to build a life with Clara. Marry her, love her, give her the happiness she deserves. She's the bravest person I've ever known, and she's suffered too much for my choices. Make it right, James. Make it all worthwhile. Your friend, always, Cole. James lowered the letter, and Clara saw tears streaming down his face. Around them, the party had grown quiet as people realized something significant was happening. Emma stood uncertainly, watching them process the weight of her brother's final gift. He thought of everything, James said, his voice breaking. Even in death, he was trying to protect you, to protect us. Clara couldn't speak. The emotions were too overwhelming, grief for Cole, gratitude for his foresight, relief that there was now irrefutable proof of her innocence. She buried her face in James's shoulder and let the tears come. Emma stepped forward hesitantly. I'm sorry to intrude on your wedding day. I didn't know. The lawyer didn't tell me you'd be getting married today. I would have waited. James looked up at her, his eyes red but his expression warm. Don't apologize. Your brother was a hero, and you've honored his memory by bringing us this. We're grateful, Miss Davidson. More grateful than we can express. Please, Emma said softly. Call me Emma. And I wonder, could you tell me about him? About who he really was? I've spent so many years estranged from him, believing the worst. I'd like to know the truth. Clara pulled back from James and wiped her eyes. Stay, she said to Emma. Join our celebration. We'll tell you everything about your brother, about his courage, his sacrifice, his love for this town and its people. You deserve to know what kind of man he was. Emma's face crumpled with relief. I'd like that very much. Mayor Hutchins, who'd been watching the exchange, stepped forward. Folks, it seems we have another guest to welcome. Emma Davidson, sister to the late, great Cole Davidson. Let's make her feel at home. The crowd responded with applause, and several people came forward to greet Emma, to share their memories of Cole. Clara watched as the young woman was embraced by the community, saw the tension leave her shoulders as she realized she was among friends. Your brother was extraordinary, Clara told Emma, taking her hand. And this final gift, it's so like him. Always thinking ahead, always trying to protect the people he loved. He loved you, Emma said, looking between Clara and James. The lawyer told me that much. He said Cole's last words were about making sure you two found happiness together. It seems he got his wish. James pulled both women into a gentle embrace. He did, and we'll make sure his memory lives on. Through our children, through the monument we're building, through the stories we'll tell. Cole Davidson will never be forgotten in this town. The musicians, sensing the emotional moment needed closure, struck up a lively tune. The mood in the hall shifted, becoming celebratory again. James led Clara back to the dance floor, and this time Emma joined them, dancing with Deputy Wilson, who'd kindly offered his hand. As the afternoon wore on, the celebration grew more joyous. Stories were shared, laughter echoed off the walls, and the community of Redemption Bend came together in a way it hadn't in years. The wounds of the past were healing, replaced by hope for the future. Clara found herself standing at the edge of the dance floor, watching James teach Emma a complicated dance step, both of them laughing when he stumbled. Her heart was so full it felt like it might burst. This was what Cole had wanted. Not just her happiness, but the healing of broken relationships, the building of community, the triumph of love over fear. Mrs. Chen appeared beside her, pressing a glass of punch into her hand. "You look happy, dear." "I am," Clara said simply. "For the first time in 5 years, I truly am." "You deserve it. You and James both." Mrs. Chen paused, then added, "And Cole deserves to be remembered this way, not as a criminal, but as a hero who gave everything for the people he loved." "He'll be remembered," Clara promised. "We'll make sure of it." As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the hall's windows, James came to claim his bride. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Cutter?" Mrs. Cutter. The name sent a thrill through her. "Yes, I'm ready." They said their goodbyes, accepting final congratulations and well wishes. Emma promised to stay in town for a few days to learn more about her brother and to get to know the people he'd protected. Mayor Hutchins assured them the monument would be ready within the month. Reverend Patterson reminded them they were expected at church on Sunday. Finally, they escaped to their flower-decorated wagon. Someone had tied tin cans to the back, which rattled and clanged as they pulled away, announcing their departure to anyone who might have missed it. The crowd followed them into the street, waving and cheering, until the wagon turned the corner and the noise faded behind them. The ride to the house by the creek was quiet, peaceful. The evening air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of pine from the mountains. James drove with one hand, the other holding Clara's, their fingers intertwined. "What are you thinking?" Clara asked. "That I'm the luckiest man alive," James said. "That I have you, that we have our whole future ahead of us, that Cole's sacrifice wasn't in vain." He paused. "And that I'm going to spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you never regret coming back." "I could never regret it," Clara said. "This is where I belong. With you, in this town, building the life we always dreamed of." They reached the house as the last light was fading from the sky. James helped Clara down, then swept her into his arms, carrying her across the threshold. She laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck, feeling lighter than she had in years. Inside, the house was quiet and welcoming. Someone, probably the women who'd helped prepare for the wedding, had lit lamps and left fresh flowers in every room. On the table was a basket covered with a cloth, and when Clara peeked inside, she found bread, cheese, cold chicken, and a bottle of wine. "They thought of everything," she marveled. "They love you," James said simply. "They want you to be happy." He set her down gently, and they stood in the middle of the room, husband and wife, the future stretching before them like an unwritten book. "So," Clara said, suddenly shy, "what now?" James smiled, that slow, warm smile that had first made her fall in love with him. "Now we start our life together. Really start it, without shadows or secrets or fear." He took her hand and led her to the window that overlooked the creek. The water sparkled in the starlight, its song a constant reminder of the passage of time, the persistence of beauty, the promise of continuity. "I love you, Clara Cutter," James said, turning her to face him. "I've loved you since the moment I first saw you. I loved you through 5 years of thinking I'd lost you, and I'll love you through whatever comes next, the good, the bad, and everything in between." "I love you too," Clara whispered. "Always have, always will." They kissed, sealing their vows once more, this time in the privacy of their home, with only the stars and the creek as witnesses. And in that kiss was everything: forgiveness and hope, grief and joy, the past acknowledged and the future embraced. When they finally parted, both were smiling through tears. James brushed a strand of hair from Clara's face, his touch infinitely tender. "Welcome home, my love." "Home," Clara repeated, tasting the word, savoring it. "Yes, I'm finally home." Outside, the creek sang its eternal song. Above, the stars wheeled in their ancient dance, and inside the little house where dreams had once died, those dreams were blooming anew, stronger and more beautiful for having survived the darkness. The first weeks of marriage unfolded like a dream Clara kept expecting to wake from. Each morning, she'd open her eyes to find James beside her, his breathing steady and peaceful. And she'd have to remind herself that this was real, that she was truly home, that the running was over. The house by the creek became their sanctuary, a place where the outside world's demands could be held at bay, at least for a little while. James had taken a few days away from his duties as sheriff, asking Deputy Wilson to handle things while he and Clara settled into their new life together. They spent those days learning each other again, discovering how 5 years had changed them both, finding new rhythms and routines that fit who they'd become rather than who they'd been. On the 4th morning of their marriage, Clara woke to find James's side of the bed empty. Sunlight streamed through the window, later than she usually rose, and she could hear sounds from the kitchen, the clatter of pans, the pump of water. She smiled, wrapped herself in a robe, and padded barefoot into the main room. James stood at the stove, his shirt sleeves rolled up, hair still disheveled from sleep, attempting to manage what appeared to be eggs and bacon. The bacon was smoking slightly, and he was frowning at it with the same intense concentration he probably used when tracking outlaws. "Need help?" Clara asked, leaning against the doorframe. He turned, his face breaking into a smile. "I was trying to surprise you with breakfast in bed. Apparently, I'm better at catching criminals than cooking eggs." Clara crossed to him and took the spatula from his hand. "Let me. You pour the coffee." They worked in comfortable silence, moving around each other with an ease that felt both new and ancient. When the food was ready, they sat at the table together, their knees touching beneath it, sharing a meal in the golden morning light. "I need to go back to the office today," James said, spreading jam on toast. "There's work piling up, and Wilson's been handling everything alone. But I don't like leaving you." "I'll be fine," Clara assured him. "I'm thinking of visiting Emma. She's still staying at the boarding house, and I promised to tell her more about Cole." James nodded. "She seems like a good woman. It's a shame she and Cole were estranged for so long." "Family can be complicated," Clara said. "But at least she's here now. At least she knows the truth about her brother." After breakfast, James prepared for work while Clara tidied the kitchen. She watched him strap on his gun belt, don his badge, transform from her husband into Sheriff Cutter. It was a strange duality, this man who held her so tenderly in the darkness and faced down dangerous men in the daylight. He paused at the door, turning back to her. "Lock up when I'm gone. And if anyone gives you trouble—" "I'll send for you immediately," Clara promised, having heard this instruction every morning since their wedding. "Go on. The town needs its sheriff." He kissed her, long and thorough, then reluctantly pulled away. "I'll be home for supper. Maybe we can take a walk by the creek after." "I'd like that." She watched him ride away, then set about preparing herself for the day. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple green dress that had belonged to her mother, one of the few possessions she'd managed to keep through all the running. Looking at herself in the mirror, she saw a woman who was beginning to look healthy again, the gauntness fading from her cheeks, a light returning to her eyes. The walk to town was pleasant, the spring air warm but not yet carrying the brutal heat of summer. Wildflowers dotted the grassland, and in the distance the mountains stood eternal and beautiful. Clara found herself breathing deeply, filling her lungs with the clean air, feeling truly alive for the first time in years. Main Street was busy with the ordinary commerce of a weekday morning. The mercantile was open, farmers were bringing goods to sell, children were playing in the street. People nodded to her as she passed, some still with a hint of uncertainty, others with genuine warmth. The transformation wasn't complete, but it was happening. She found Emma at the boarding house, sitting on the porch with a cup of tea and a book. The younger woman looked up and smiled, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. "Good morning, Clara. I was hoping you'd come by." Clara settled into the chair, accepting the tea that Emma poured from a pot on the small table between them. "How are you finding Redemption Bend?" "It's lovely," Emma said. "Quieter than San Francisco, but there's something peaceful about it. I can see why Cole chose to make his life here." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, sipping their tea. Then Emma set down her cup and turned to Clara with an earnest expression. "Tell me about him," she said. "Tell me what he was like before everything happened. I have memories from when we were children, but I want to know who he became." Clara considered where to begin. "He was one of the kindest men I ever knew. When I first came to Redemption Bend, I was alone. My parents had died and I had no family. Cole was the first person to welcome me, to make sure I felt like I belonged. He introduced me to people, helped me find work, looked after me like a brother would." "He always had a protective streak," Emma said softly. Even as a boy, he was always trying to shield me from our father's temper. That's how he was with everyone, Claire continued, especially after he became a deputy. He believed in justice, but he also believed in mercy. I remember once he caught a young man stealing bread from the bakery. Instead of arresting him, Cole found out the boy's family was starving because his father had been injured and couldn't work. Cole paid for the bread, then helped the father find work he could do despite his injury. Emma's eyes filled with tears. That sounds like Cole. Our father wanted him to go into business, to make money and build the family fortune, but Cole wanted to help people. It's what drove us apart. I chose father's approval over my brother's dreams. He never spoke ill of you, Clara said gently. When he talked about his family, which wasn't often, he'd mention his sister with fondness. I think he missed you, even if he never said so directly. I missed him too, Emma whispered. I was too proud to admit it, too afraid of defying father. And now it's too late. I can never tell him I was wrong, that I should have stood by him. Clara reached over and took Emma's hand. He knew. I'm certain of it. Cole understood people, understood their struggles and fears. He wouldn't have blamed you for choosing the path that seemed safest. They talked for hours, Clara sharing stories of Cole's life in Redemption Bend, his friendship with James, his dedication to his work, his quiet acts of kindness that had made him beloved in the community. Emma listened hungrily, storing away each detail like a precious gem, building a picture of the brother she'd lost. He died believing he'd failed, Clara said when she reached the end of the story, the days in New Mexico when Cole's life had slipped away. He wanted so badly to get me home, to see James and me married, to finish what we'd started. I tried to tell him he'd succeeded in the ways that mattered, but I don't think he believed it. But he did succeed, Emma said firmly. Look at you and James. Look at this town that now knows the truth. Look at the monument they're building in his honor. He succeeded in every way that truly matters. A voice interrupted them. Miss Davidson? Mrs. Cutter? They turned to find Mayor Hutchins approaching, his face flushed with excitement. I'm glad I found you both. The monument is ready. We're planning the dedication ceremony for this Sunday after church services. I wanted to make sure you'd both be there. Clara felt her heart skip. It's finished already? The stonemason worked day and night, the mayor said proudly. The whole town wanted it done as quickly as possible. It's beautiful, truly beautiful. A fitting tribute to a remarkable man. Emma stood, her hands clasped together. May we see it? Before the ceremony? Mayor Hutchins beamed. I was hoping you'd ask. Follow me. They walked together to the town square, where a large shape stood draped in canvas. A small crowd had already gathered, curious about the covered monument. The mayor shooed them back, insisting that Emma and Clara should have the first viewing. Ready? He asked, his hand on the canvas. Emma looked at Clara, who nodded. Together, they braced themselves as the mayor pulled away the covering. The monument was carved from gray granite, standing perhaps 8 feet tall. At the top was a star, the symbol of law enforcement, and below it, carved in deep letters, Cole Davidson, 1845, 1875, deputy and hero. He gave his life in service to justice and in protection of this community. His sacrifice will never be forgotten. Below the inscription was a relief carving of a badge, and at the base someone had already placed fresh flowers. Emma's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Clara felt her own throat tighten, the reality of Cole's loss hitting her anew. This stone would stand long after they were all gone, a permanent reminder of the man who'd given everything. It's perfect, Emma managed to say. Thank you. Thank you so much. The mayor looked pleased and a bit emotional himself. The town raised the money in just 3 days. Everyone wanted to contribute. Your brother meant a great deal to a lot of people, Miss Davidson. Word of the unveiled monument spread quickly. Within an hour, people were gathering in the square, laying flowers at the base, standing in quiet contemplation. Clara and Emma stayed, watching as the community came to pay their respects to a man many had wrongly condemned just weeks before. Old Timothy Marsh approached, leaning heavily on his cane. He stood before the monument for a long moment, then turned to Emma. Your brother once saved my grandson from drowning in the creek. Never asked for thanks, never told anyone about it, just did what needed doing. I'm sorry I ever doubted him. Sorry I believed the lies. He deserved better from all of us. He's at peace now, Emma said gently, and the truth is known. That's what matters. As the afternoon wore on, Clara excused herself, leaving Emma surrounded by townspeople eager to share their memories of Cole. She needed to think, to process the mix of emotions the monument had stirred. She found herself walking toward the church, drawn by a need for quiet contemplation. Reverend Patterson was inside, arranging flowers on the altar. He looked up as Clara entered, his face softening with understanding. "It's a beautiful monument," he said. "It is," Clara agreed, sliding into a pew, "but it also makes everything feel so final. As long as Cole existed only in memory, in stories, there was a sense that he might somehow still be alive somewhere. But that stone, it's permanent, undeniable." The Reverend sat down beside her. "Death is always difficult, even when we've had time to prepare for it. But that monument isn't just about death, Clara. It's about legacy. Cole's life, his choices, his sacrifice, they'll inspire people for generations. Children not yet born will read his name and learn about courage and selflessness." "I hope so," Clara said. "I hope his death meant something beyond just bringing James and me back together." "It did. It already has." The Reverend gestured broadly. "Look at this community. Before the truth came out, we were divided, suspicious, quick to judge. Cole's story has reminded us of the danger of jumping to conclusions, of the importance of seeking truth even when it's uncomfortable. That's a powerful lesson, one this town needed to learn." Clara sat with those words, finding comfort in them. The Reverend was right. Cole's sacrifice had created ripples that extended far beyond her personal happiness. "Reverend," she said after a moment, "I want to do something. I want to honor Cole in a way that's active, that keeps helping people. I've been thinking about starting a fund for families who fall on hard times, like that boy Cole helped who was stealing bread. Something that continues his work of protecting and helping the vulnerable." Reverend Patterson smiled. "That's a wonderful idea. I think the town would embrace it wholeheartedly. We could call it the Davidson Memorial Fund. Would you help me organize it? Help me make sure the money goes where it's truly needed?" "It would be my honor." They talked for another hour, planning the details, discussing how to present the idea to the community. By the time Clara left the church, she felt lighter, purposeful. She had a way to channel her grief into something constructive, something Cole would have approved of. She was walking home when she saw James riding toward her, still in his sheriff's uniform. He dismounted when he reached her, concern written on his face. "I heard about the monument. Are you all right?" "I am," she said, and meant it. It was emotional, but it was also right, and I've been thinking about how to honor Cole's memory in an ongoing way. She explained her idea for the fund as they walked together, leading his horse. James listened intently, nodding his approval. "Cole would love that," he said. "He always cared more about people than recognition or glory. This would be exactly the kind of legacy he'd want." They reached the house as the sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains. James tended to his horse while Clara started preparing supper, falling into a domestic routine that felt both novel and completely natural. Over dinner, James shared news from town. Emma's planning to stay in Redemption Bend permanently. She talked to Mayor Hutchins about buying property, maybe opening a shop of some kind. Clara smiled. "I'm glad. I think she needs this connection to her brother, needs to be part of the community he protected." "There's something else," James said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "I got a telegram from the territorial governor. He wants to award you and Cole posthumously with commendations for your service in bringing down the gang. There's going to be an official ceremony in Helena next month." Clara set down her fork. "I don't need recognition, James. What we did, what Cole did, wasn't for glory. I know that, but the territory needs to acknowledge what happened, to set the record straight officially. And Clara, there will be compensation. The territorial government is offering restitution for the years you spent in hiding, for the hardship and sacrifice." "I don't want their money," Clara said firmly. "We have enough. If there's compensation, I want it to go to the Davidson Memorial Fund to continue helping people in Cole's name." James reached across the table and took her hand. "That's exactly what I told the governor you'd say. He's already agreed to it. The fund will be substantial, Clara. We can help a lot of people. Tears pricked Clara's eyes, but they were good tears, hopeful tears. Cole would be so pleased. All he ever wanted was to make a difference, to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. That night, as they lay in bed with the window open to catch the cool evening breeze, James pulled Clara close. "I've been thinking about the future," he said, "about what we want our life to look like." "And what do you want?" Clara asked, tracing patterns on his chest. "I want children," he said quietly. "I want to fill this house with laughter and noise and the sound of little feet running. I want to teach our son, our Cole, about the man he's named for. I want to watch our children grow up safe and happy, knowing they're loved." Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. "I want that too. I've wanted it for so long, even when I thought it was impossible." "It's not impossible anymore," James said, rolling to face her. "Everything we dreamed about 5 years ago, it's all possible now. We just have to reach out and take it." They made love slowly, tenderly, as the creek sang its eternal song beyond the window. And in the joining of their bodies was a promise, a hope for new life, for the future they'd fought so hard to achieve. The following Sunday dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for the monument dedication. The entire town turned out, dressed in their finest, gathering in the square where Cole's monument stood wreathed in flowers. Reverend Patterson led the ceremony, his voice carrying clearly across the assembled crowd. "We gather today to honor a man of exceptional courage and character," he began. "Cole Davidson gave his life in service to this community, and in doing so, he exemplified the highest ideals of sacrifice and dedication. But more than that, he showed us the true meaning of love, love of neighbor, love of justice, love of truth." Emma stood beside Clara and James, her face serene despite the tears on her cheeks. She'd asked to say a few words, and now Reverend Patterson gestured for her to come forward. "I didn't know my brother well in his final years," Emma said, her voice steady and clear. "We were estranged, separated by pride and misunderstanding. But in the weeks since I've come to Redemption Bend, I've learned who Cole truly was. I've heard your stories, seen the impact of his life, understood the magnitude of his sacrifice, and I'm so very proud to have been his sister." She paused, collecting herself. Cole believed in protecting the innocent, in standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. He believed in second chances and in the fundamental goodness of people. These beliefs cost him his life, but they also gave his life meaning and purpose. I hope that this monument will serve not just as a reminder of Cole, but as an inspiration to all of us to live with the same courage and conviction. The crowd erupted in applause. People came forward to shake Emma's hand, to embrace her, to welcome her fully into the community. Clara watched with a full heart, seeing how Cole's sacrifice was creating connections, building bridges, bringing people together. After the ceremony, there was a reception at the church hall. Clara found herself surrounded by women from the town, all eager to talk about the Davidson Memorial Fund. Mrs. Chen had already pledged a substantial amount, and others were following suit. By the end of the afternoon, the fund had grown beyond Clara's wildest expectations. "We're going to do so much good," Abigail Wilson said, her eyes shining. "Families won't have to choose between food and medicine. Children won't have to go hungry when their parents fall on hard times. Cole's legacy will live on in real, tangible ways." As the sun began to set, Clara and James walked home together, their hands intertwined. Emma had gone to visit the Hutchins family, who were helping her look at properties in town. The street was quiet now, the excitement of the day fading into peaceful evening. "Are you happy?" James asked, the same question he'd posed on their wedding day. Claire considered the question seriously. "I am, but it's a different kind of happiness than I expected. It's not the simple joy of having what I want. It's something deeper. The satisfaction of knowing that suffering can lead to meaning, that sacrifice can bear fruit, that love really does conquer all." They stopped on the porch of their house, looking out at the creek that gleamed in the fading light. James wrapped his arms around Clara from behind, and she leaned back against him, feeling safe and cherished and home. "Sometimes I think about that night at the depot," James said. "When you first stepped off the train and I was so angry, so certain I knew the truth. I think about how close I came to sending you away, to losing you all over again. But you didn't, Claire said. When I showed you the ring, when I started to explain, you listened. You were willing to hear the truth even when it meant admitting you'd been wrong. That took courage too, James. Not as much courage as it took for you to come back, knowing how you'd be received. Clara turned in his arms to face him. We've both been courageous. We've both sacrificed, and now we get to reap the rewards of that courage and sacrifice. We get to build a life together, raise a family, be part of this community. That's the prize, James. That's what makes it all worthwhile. He kissed her as the last light faded from the sky, as the first stars began to appear overhead. And in that kiss was everything they'd endured, everything they'd overcome, everything they'd become. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a rhythm that felt both ordinary and miraculous. Clara threw herself into organizing the Davidson Memorial Fund, working with Reverend Patterson and a committee of townswomen to establish guidelines and processes. The first family they helped was the Hendersons, whose barn had been burned 5 years before. The fund paid for repairs and improvements, a direct way of acknowledging the injustice they'd suffered. Mrs. Henderson came to Clara's door one afternoon, her face transformed by gratitude and something that looked like peace. I've been carrying anger for so long, she confessed, anger at Cole, at you, at the whole situation. But seeing the good that's coming from the fund, understanding what really happened, it's helped me let go. Thank you, Clara. Thank you for not holding my hatred against me. We've all made mistakes, Clara said, embracing the older woman. What matters is that we learn from them, that we choose forgiveness and move forward. Emma became a fixture in the community, opening a small dress shop on Main Street that quickly became popular. She had her brother's gift for connecting with people, and soon she was as beloved as Cole had been. Clara and Emma grew close, their shared grief over Cole creating a bond that deepened into genuine friendship. One evening, about 6 weeks after the wedding, Clara was preparing supper when she felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. She gripped the edge of the counter, breathing deeply, waiting for it to pass. It had been happening for a few days now, these moments of lightheadedness, along with a persistent queasiness in the mornings. She sat down heavily in a chair, her hand going to her stomach. Could it be? It seemed too soon, too perfect, but the signs were there. She counted back the weeks and realized it was possible, more than possible. James came home to find her sitting at the table, her hand still on her stomach, a wondering expression on her face. Clara? What's wrong? She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. James, I think I'm carrying our child. The words hung in the air for a moment, impossible and wonderful. Then James was across the room, dropping to his knees beside her chair, his hand joining hers on her still flat stomach. A baby? His voice was choked with emotion. Truly? I'm not certain yet, but all the signs point to it. We should see the doctor to be sure, but James, I think we're going to have a baby. He pulled her into his arms, and they held each other as the magnitude of it sank in. After everything they'd been through, after all the years of waiting and hoping and believing it might never happen, they were going to be parents. If it's a boy, James said, his voice muffled against her shoulder, we'll name him Cole, just as we promised. And if it's a girl? James pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. Then we'll name her Hope, because that's what you brought back to me. Hope. Dr. Matthews confirmed the pregnancy a week later. Clara was indeed expecting the baby due in early winter. The news spread through Redemption Bend like wildfire, and suddenly it seemed the whole town was celebrating with them. Gifts began arriving, hand-knitted blankets, carved wooden toys, offers of help and support. Emma was particularly thrilled, declaring herself the future aunt and immediately beginning to sew baby clothes. Cole would have loved this, she said, her needle flying through delicate fabric. He always wanted you and James to have everything you dreamed of. A baby, it's perfect. As Clara's pregnancy progressed, visible proof of new life growing within her, she felt the final pieces of her broken past clicking into place. The nightmares that had plagued her since New Mexico, dreams of running, of Cole dying, of never finding her way home, gradually faded, replaced by dreams of the future. Dreams of a child laughing in the yard, of James teaching a young boy to ride, of a family gathered around the dinner table in the house by the creek. One evening in late summer, with her belly just beginning to show the evidence of the child within, Clara stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. James came up behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her, his hands resting on the swell of their child. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we've come," Clara said. "About that girl who ran away from her wedding 5 years ago, terrified and alone. About the man who spent 5 years believing he'd been betrayed. About all the pain and fear and loneliness. And about how it led us here, to this moment, with our child growing and our future bright. Do you wish it had been different, that we hadn't had to go through all of that?" Clara was quiet for a moment, really considering the question. "Part of me wishes we could have had these 5 years together, that Cole could have lived, that no one had to suffer. But another part of me knows that we wouldn't be who we are now without that suffering. We wouldn't appreciate this happiness the same way. We wouldn't understand the value of truth and sacrifice and forgiveness." She turned in his arms to face him. "The pain made us stronger, James. It taught us what really matters. And because of what we went through, we can help others who are suffering. The Davidson Fund, Emma finding her way home, this community learning to look deeper than appearances, none of that would have happened without the darkness we walked through." James rested his forehead against hers. "You're wise beyond your years, Mrs. Cutter." "I've had good teachers," she said. "You, Cole, even the hardship itself. Everything has taught me something." As autumn approached, bringing with it the cool air and turning leaves, the town prepared for another celebration. The territorial governor was coming to Redemption Bend to present the official commendations and to announce the formal establishment of the Davidson Memorial Fund. It would be a grand affair, with dignitaries from across the territory attending. Clara, now noticeably pregnant, worked with the planning committee to organize the event. It would take place in the town square, with Cole's monument as the focal point. There would be speeches, music, and a formal dinner afterward. The day of the celebration dawned crisp and clear, the sky that particular shade of blue that seemed to exist only in Montana. Clara dressed carefully in a new gown Emma had made for her, one that accommodated her growing belly while still being elegant enough for the formal occasion. Governor Potts was an imposing man with a thick mustache and shrewd eyes. He greeted Clara warmly, expressing his personal gratitude for her sacrifice. "The territory owes you a great debt," he said. "You and Mr. Davidson both. What you did, the years you gave up, the hardship you endured, it's the kind of heroism that rarely gets recognized. Today, we remedy that." The ceremony was magnificent. The governor spoke eloquently about duty and sacrifice, about the kind of courage that doesn't seek recognition but deserves it nonetheless. He presented James with a commendation for his work in bringing down the gang, then turned to Cole's monument. "Cole Davidson cannot be here to receive his commendation," the governor said, his voice ringing across the square. "But his sister, Emma Davidson, will accept it on his behalf. And Clara Cutter, who sacrificed alongside him, will receive her own recognition for her invaluable contribution to justice and peace in this territory." Emma stepped forward, accepting the framed commendation with shaking hands. Then it was Clara's turn. She moved carefully, conscious of the child she carried, and accepted her own commendation. The parchment was beautiful, decorated with the territorial seal, officially acknowledging her role in the operation and expressing gratitude for her sacrifice. But it was the governor's next announcement that brought gasps from the crowd. "In addition to these commendations, I'm pleased to announce that the territorial legislature has voted to match the community's contributions to the Davidson Memorial Fund dollar for dollar. This fund will serve not just Redemption Bend, but communities across Montana Territory, helping families in need and continuing Cole Davidson's legacy of protecting the vulnerable." The crowd erupted in cheers. Clara felt tears streaming down her face as she realized the magnitude of what was happening. Cole's sacrifice was reaching further than she'd ever imagined, touching lives across the entire territory. After the official ceremony, the celebration continued with music and dancing and more food than the town could possibly eat. Clara found herself surrounded by well-wishers, people wanting to congratulate her on the baby, on the commendation, on everything she'd accomplished. Emma found her in the midst of the crowd and pulled her aside. There's someone here who wants to meet you, she said, her eyes twinkling mysteriously. She led Clara to a quiet corner where an elderly woman sat, her silver hair pinned up elegantly, her eyes sharp and kind. Emma made the introduction. Clara, this is Mrs. Margaret Davidson, Cole's and my grandmother. Clara's mouth fell open. I didn't know. Cole never mentioned. He wouldn't have, the old woman said, her voice strong despite her years. We had a falling out when he chose law enforcement over the family business. I was proud and foolish, just like my son was with Cole, just like Emma was. The Davidson family seems to specialize in letting pride separate us from the people we love. She reached out and took Clara's hand. But I'm here now, and I want you to know how grateful I am. You loved my grandson, protected him, honored his memory. You're carrying new life that will bear his name. You've given me back something I thought I'd lost forever. A connection to Cole, a way to make amends for my mistakes. Clara sat down beside her, overwhelmed. He loved you. He never said it directly, but I could tell. When he talked about his childhood, about learning to ride, about summer visits to a ranch, those memories involved you, didn't they? The old woman nodded, tears slipping down her weathered cheeks. He spent every summer with me until he was 15. Then the arguments started, the demands that he follow the path his father had chosen. I sided with my son instead of my grandson, and Cole stopped coming. I haven't seen him in over 10 years, and now it's too late to tell him I was wrong. It's not too late, Clara said firmly. He's part of this baby I'm carrying. If it's a boy, he'll be Cole Davidson Cutter, and we'll tell him about all the people he's named for, the hero who sacrificed everything, the grandmother who loved him. Your story, your connection to Cole, it continues. Mrs. Davidson embraced Clara, and they held each other while around them the celebration continued. Another broken piece was being mended, another relationship restored across the barrier of death. As evening fell and the official guests departed, Redemption Bend settled into a quieter celebration. James found Clara sitting on a bench near Cole's monument, her hand resting on her belly, watching the stars emerge. Tired? He asked, sitting beside her. Exhausted, she admitted, but happy. James, look at what's happened. Look at how much good has come from so much pain. The fund, the commendations, Emma finding her place here, even Cole's grandmother coming back into the family. It's like every broken thing is being made whole. Not every broken thing, James said gently. Cole is still gone. That wound will always be there. Yes, Clara agreed. But even that loss has meaning now. It's not senseless anymore. His death bought something precious, truth, justice, healing. And his legacy will live on through the fund, through our child, through the changes his sacrifice brought to this community. She looked up at the monument, at Cole's name carved in stone. I used to be so angry at the unfairness of it all. Why did he have to die? Why did we have to suffer so much? But I'm beginning to understand that some questions don't have answers, and some losses can't be fixed. What matters is what we do with the grief, how we transform suffering into something meaningful. James pulled her close, and they sat together in the gathering darkness, two people who'd walked through fire and emerged not unscathed, but stronger. The baby moved within Clara, a flutter of life, a promise of tomorrow. Tell me about the future, James said. Tell me what you see when you imagine the years ahead. Clara smiled, her hand covering his where it rested on her belly. I see this child growing up loved and safe. I see more children, if we're blessed. I see you as sheriff, keeping this town safe, dispensing justice with wisdom and mercy. I see the Davidson Fund helping countless families, spreading Cole's legacy far and wide. I see Emma marrying, having children of her own, filling this town with the Davidson family Cole never got to have. She paused, her voice growing softer. I see us growing old together in the house by the creek. I see grandchildren playing in the yard. I see a life built on truth and sacrifice and love, a life that honors everything we've been through, everything we've lost, everything we've gained. That's a beautiful vision, James said. Let's make it real. Every bit of it. They sat a while longer, reluctant to leave the peace of the moment. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. Around them, the town settled into sleep. And beside them, carved in stone, Cole's name stood as a permanent reminder of the price of truth and the power of sacrifice. Finally, they rose and walked home together, their steps slow to accommodate Clara's pregnancy. The house welcomed them, warm and bright, a haven they'd fought so hard to reach. Inside, they moved through the evening routine, preparing for bed, speaking in quiet voices about the events of the day. As they lay in the darkness, the creek's song drifting through the open window, James spoke once more. "Clara, I need to say something. I need you to know that every day with you is a gift. Every morning I wake up beside you, every evening we spend together, every moment of this life we're building. It's all more than I ever dreamed possible." "I know," Clara whispered. "I feel the same way. When you stepped off that train, when I saw you standing there after 5 years, my first instinct was to send you away. I was so afraid of being hurt again, so certain I knew the truth. But something made me listen, made me look at that ring, made me willing to hear your story. Do you know what that something was?" "What?" "Love," James said simply. Love that had survived 5 years of anger and betrayal and loss. Love that was stronger than pride or fear or pain. Love that gave me the courage to risk everything one more time. Clara turned to face him, her hand finding his in the darkness. That's what Cole was counting on. That's why he kept the ring, why he made me promise to bring it back to you. He knew that love like ours doesn't die, even when everything else falls apart. He was right, James said. And now we have a chance to prove it, to build a life that shows what love can create, what it can overcome, what it can achieve. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the child nestled safely between them. And in the morning, they would wake to another day of building their future, another day of transforming sacrifice into meaning, another day of proving that love, really does conquer all. The months passed, and Clara's belly grew round with the promise of new life. Winter came to Montana, blanketing the landscape in white, but the house by the creek remained warm and full of love. And when the baby finally came on a clear January morning, with the midwife attending and James pacing anxiously outside, it was a boy. They named him Cole Davidson Cutter, and when Clara held him for the first time, she wept, for the man he was named after, for the journey that had brought them here, for the future that stretched bright and beautiful before them. James held them both, his wife and his son, and whispered a prayer of gratitude for second chances and persistent love. Emma was the first visitor, bringing gifts and tears of joy. "He has Cole's eyes," she said, peering at the baby's face. "The same shape, the same color. It's like having a piece of my brother back." Mrs. Davidson came next, the old woman's face transformed by wonder as she held her great-grandson. "Welcome to the world, little Cole," she murmured. "You carry a proud name. Live up to it, and you'll make us all proud." The whole town celebrated the birth, bringing gifts and good wishes. The Davidson Memorial Fund made a donation in the baby's honor. The governor sent a telegram of congratulation. And in the town square, someone laid fresh flowers at the base of Cole's monument, a gesture that had become tradition, a way of keeping his memory alive. As Clara recovered from the birth and settled into motherhood, she found herself thinking often of that night at the depot, of standing on the platform with her suitcase and her secret, facing James's anger and the town's judgment. It felt like a lifetime ago, like it had happened to someone else. But it had happened to her. Every bit of it, the fear, the running, the sacrifice, the loss, and every bit of it had led to this moment, to this child sleeping peacefully in her arms, to this husband who loved her beyond reason, to this life that was more beautiful for having been so hard won. One evening, when little Cole was a month old, Clara sat in the rocking chair by the window, nursing her son and watching the winter sunset paint the snow-covered mountains pink and gold. James was at his desk, working on reports, but he looked up and caught her eye. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Clara smiled, looking down at the baby in her arms. "I'm thinking about trains," she said, "about how they carry us away from one life and toward another, about how the hardest journey can lead to the sweetest destination." "Are you glad you got on that train, the one that brought you back to me?" "Every single day," Clara said. "Every moment, every heartbeat. I'm glad I came back. I'm glad I showed you the ring. I'm glad for all of it, the pain and the joy, the suffering and the redemption, because it brought us here, to this moment, to this life. James came to her, kneeling beside the rocking chair, his hand resting gently on their son's head. "We made it, Clara. After everything, we made it home." "We did," she agreed, her eyes filling with happy tears. "We really did." And outside, the creek continued its eternal song, witness to suffering and joy, loss and finding, death and life. The monument stood guard in the town square, Cole's name a permanent promise that sacrifice has meaning, that truth prevails, that love endures. The train that had brought Clara home was long gone, carrying other passengers to other destinations. But its most important journey was complete. It had delivered a woman to her destiny, carried truth back to a town that needed it, and set in motion a chain of events that would echo through generations. In the house by the creek, a family sat together as darkness fell. A sheriff and his wife, a baby named for a hero, bound together by love that had survived the impossible. And in that quiet domestic scene was all the proof anyone could need that some things are worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, worth believing in even when all hope seems lost.